want to share this. How do I share? All right, I guess we're going to be redoing this. Never mind. Figured it out. Sorry for the delay. I'm just sharing the link for the Patreon. I know that nobody's watching this right now, but when you guys watch this in review, give me a moment. All right. Just under 2 minutes in, and I have shared the link for the live stream. All right, let's get into. I'll wait for you guys to come. Let me pull up a bio on Henning Nelms, who is not a very well-known name in Magic. I mean, he's known for his book, but he was never a professional magician. He was always an amateur magician. He was also a lawyer, a director. He had a lot of experience in the theater. He was a novelist, and he wrote a few books. He wrote a few books. He wrote a few novels. He wrote a novel called Hake Talbot, the Hangman's Handyman. Oh, wait, no, that was his pen name. Hake Talbot, when he was writing mystery novels. His two mystery novels were The Hangman's Handyman, that was published in 1942, and The Rim of the Pit, which was published in 1944. I haven't read them. The Rim of the Pit is considered a like one of those locked room mystery books. I think it's sort of like one of these. You know how they have these puzzle rooms these days that you go in with a bunch of friends and it's locked and you have to figure out how to escape the room. Apparently, that book, Rim of the Pit, was like that in that style. He wrote plays. He wrote a play called The Orphan Girl in 1944, and a few nonfiction books. Lighting the Amateur Stage, which I've actually read. It's very technical. It's about lighting in theaters, but I think it's a skill magicians need to have, especially if you're working doing close-up magic in a theater. You kind of need to know your lighting. Every single time I'm performing in a different venue, it takes a while to set up the lighting in the theater because you need to light up the area where you're working with cards, but it can't be too lit right above you if the projector is being projected behind you, just because when that light passes through that light coming down, it screws up the image for the projector. So just things to think about. He wasn't working with that as far as I'm aware of in his work, just because projectors and cameras weren't really a thing on stage. But you know what? It does not hurt to have just a little bit of background experience and knowledge in lighting will do a lot for you in the long run. It just makes stuff look clean, professional. It can do a lot for your set. Also, now with the automatic programming, you can set the lighting to change for different moments of your show. So there might be moments where you're doing a card section where you need the lighting a certain way. There might be moments where you're standing up and you're doing, more of a parlor piece and you want to change the lights for those moods. read this book, Lighting the Amateur Stage. It's written in 1931, but still good today. He also wrote a book called Building an Amateur Audience. I'm not too sure what that's about. This is from 1936. He wrote a primer on stagecraft, which again I'm sure is all about the stage. That was 1941. He wrote a book called Play Production in 1950, which is sort of, I haven't read it all. I've read it a little bit, but it's about the just behind the scenes organizing and producing a play, which magicians should read because there's not much difference in between producing a play and producing a magic show. It's sort of the same type of venues for the most part, same things you're gonna have to do, sell tickets, all that fun stuff. And then he wrote a book called Thinking with a Pencil in 1964. I have not read that. Henning Nelms was also a member of the SAM, Assembly 23. I'm not too sure where that is. I think it might be, hold on, let me just look this up. Assembly 23 for the SAM. I'm trying to figure out where this is. Washington, D.C. So I guess that's where he lives. Washington, D.C. I did not know that about Henning Nelms. He was also, he's also a member of the IBM Ring 50. This was during the 60s. He would submit ring reports to the MUM and Linking Ring, so you can probably still find those. They are in print and very easy to find. Not really worth buying, in my opinion. They're not really good. Magazines, okay, I gotta be careful what I say. I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm not a fan of the Linking Ring or the MUM. They're not bad magazines. It's just not my taste. But they do have good pieces from time to time. Anyways, Henning Nelms also taught drama at Middlebury College in Vermont. So I guess he lived there for a little bit. He was born 1900, November 30th, 1900, in Baltimore, Maryland, and he died in 1986. And I guess he died, let's see where he died. He died in Westchester County, New York, White Plains. I'm not too sure where that is. I don't think it's that far from New York, actually. New York City, I mean. Let me just check quickly on the map for my own curiosity. Oh, he's just outside of New York. He's just a little bit north of Manhattan. Well, when I say a little bit, maybe an hour drive, maybe more than an hour, not too sure, but it's not too far from New York. This is where he died. It'd be interesting to find out more about him. He was born Henning Cunningham Nelms, which is a very unusual middle name, Cunningham. For those of you guys who have seen the movie Bill Cunningham, New York, he's a famous photographer in New York, same name. Anyways, let's see what else he did. So he's known for the magic books, Applause and How to Get It, which I believe might be available as a PDF on Conjuring Arts. I'm not too sure. I haven't read it, but he wrote it. And the book he's most famous for, which is this book right here, which I believe was first published by Dover. Not too sure on that, but I believe it might have been first published by Dover. Let me check quickly. I'm going to move this down so you guys can see me more. Let's see the history of this book here. This is the book, by the way. This is the paperback edition. I don't know if there's a hardcover edition. But let's go into it and see what's going on. I'm Dover. Okay, so Henning Nelms owns the copyright. All rights reserved by Pan American and International Copyright Conventions. So it was originally published by Dover in 1969. So I guess Dover still owns the copyright, but he might own the copyright. Maybe his family. I'm not too sure. All I know is Dover's the only people who have been reprinting this. So, and I've looked into the rights because we were thinking, when I was making ebooks for Conjuring Arts, we were, we really wanted to do these books, but I don't think we were able to just because of the copyright. So it's interesting that I wonder what he published. I don't know if he was well known. Dover publishes some magic books sometimes, and Dover has a huge distribution. So it's just interesting to me to see sometimes the books that they're published. Some of them are from virtually unknown magicians, and other books that they publish are from very well-known magicians. So it's interesting to me personally, the history of the publication. I have been reading this, rereading this. I've read it before, but rereading this, I think we might do this in two parts like we did for Lapal because I'm not finished yet, but I'll sort of bring you through to where I am. We can talk about it. So, just leave some comments or whatever when we finish this. Leave comments if you have read it, if you haven't read it. But it's an interesting book. And okay, so we'll go through the table of contents. Okay, so just read off. You know what? I'll read off the table of contents and briefly comment on them from what I know, and if I have something to say, I will. So, Chapter 1: The Two Magics. So this is Henning Nelms talking about the two types of magic, which I believe he defines it. He defines it as tricks versus illusions. Tricks versus illusions. We'll go more into that, but it's, for me, there's many different types of magic, and there's people who divide magic in different ways. But he talks about it, tricks versus illusions. Stuff that you're presenting as tricks, where the audience understands that there's a trick to the piece, versus illusions, where audience are sort of sucked into a presentation. I'll give you an early example where he talks about, he just talks about ESP, and he's at dinner with some friends, and everybody's giving, their impressions on it. Do they think it's real? Do they think it's fake? And, people, a 5-10 minute conversation, he all of a sudden just says, you know what? I don't know if it's real or not, but I have a friend who I really think he's psychic. He doesn't really claim to have powers, but he always does weird stuff, and he knows certain stuff without anybody telling him. And I do this experiment with him sometimes where I call him and I have a card hidden or a word hidden, and he somehow knows it. If you want, I don't know if he's going to pick up. I don't know if he's available, but we can call him and do a we can test him right now. See if it's real, see if it's fake. And so that's the introduction to one of the ESP pieces earlier on in the book. And it's one of the examples of an illusion where it's built up, where the audience doesn't feel there's a trick to it. They feel like, oh, it's real. They're being sucked into that. But he goes into the drama of that and how you build that narrative and that atmosphere and that willingness to believe in the context of the performance. All right, so that's chapter 1. We'll go into it in a moment. Chapter 2, deception versus conviction, also very interesting. Chapter 3, the measure of meaning, which is all about giving meaning to your presentations. Chapter 4, which is just called Who. And in this chapter, he talks a lot about who are you going to be when you're performing, whether you're performing your show or you're performing a piece. Who are you? Like, who does the audience feel that you are? Who are you playing? Are you playing a character? Are you yourself? Are you a different version of yourself? Who are you? Does the audience accept it? How can we make the audience accept who you're presenting yourself as in the context of a performance, magic performance? 5, making the most of assistants. Very interesting chapter on how to use assistants and how to use stooges and confederates, and talks all about that stuff. Number 6, casting the spell. This is about incorporating pseudo magic rituals into your work to make it more convincing. For example, we have words abracadabra, hocus pocus, which have a magical meaning, and other spells. If you watch Harry Potter or fantasy movies, magicians always, whenever they're doing magic, there's a ritual. They're doing something. Either they're making some sort of special brew or potion, or they're saying words during a ritual which unlock that magical power. He talks about that in this chapter, chapter 6, casting the spell. Chapter 7, mystery without magic, which is what it sounds like, performing a magic piece, but without it having something magical and mysterious, but without there being a magical cause. For example, for doing a super memory demonstration, using your mind to decipher stuff psychologically, sort of as a psychologist, an expert psychologist. He literally talks about Darren Brown. Darren Brown's whole personality and performing persona, decades before Darren Brown even existed. At least I think he didn't exist back then. Well, he may have been alive, but Darren Brown might have been a baby if he was alive at the time of this publishing. I'm not too sure how old Darren Brown is. 69. I'm not too sure. But we go on. Providing the proof, another great chapter. Chapter 9, devices for deception. Chapter 10, the great secret. And then I don't think I got further than that. So let's go through the book at the point where we're on right now, which is the table of contents. Pretty crazy how slow we're going, but it's how it works sometimes. There's a lot happening here. All right, so he mentions that he provides 60-something routines in this book, and not to do them. He admits that most of them are not good routines. He puts the routines in the books to illustrate certain points that he's trying to make. Some of the routines are kind of cool ideas, but not great, in my opinion. Although, it's always one of those things where somebody may come along and look at something and be like, wow, this is genius. I can use this for my show. So even though it doesn't suit me or you, it might suit somebody. Anyways, he acknowledges this. Interestingly, this is supposed to be one of David Blaine's favorite books. David Blaine always talks about it. This book right here, Magic and Showmanship by Henning Nelms, a handbook for conjurers. And what's interesting, in David Blaine's own book, opens with the story of Robert Houdin quenching the uprising of the Marabouts in Algeria in the 1850s, 1856, North Africa. So David Blaine opens his book with the story of Robert Houdin performing magic to defeat the Marabout priests, the shamans over there, who sort of had a lot of influence over the government. And so they sent Robert Houdin there to perform magic to sort of show that French magic was superior to North African magic. and so just to help the government get more control over the people. Sort of weird situation, but that's what happened. You can read all about it uh, in this book. But what's interesting, the story that he tells, uh, you know what? I'll read this story. It's actually a great story, and it lends well to the first lesson in the book. So, it starts off. One of Robert Houdin's feats is probably the most perfect example of conjuring ever performed. The Marabouts had a trick which apparently proved that no pistol aimed at them would fire. The French conjurer countered by letting a Marabout shoot at him and catching the bullet in an apple stuck on the point of a knife. So he had an apple, it was stuck on the point of a knife, and the Marabout would shoot it at him, and the apple would catch it. Um, However, Robert Houdin had announced publicly that his magic consisted entirely of tricks, and the shrewder Marabouts guessed that his bullet-catching feat could be performed only with his own gun. Sometime later, while the Frenchman was stopping in a native village, a Marabout drew two pistols from his burnous and challenged Robert Houdin to a duel, in which the Marabout claimed the right to the first shot. Robert Houdin protested, but finally agreed to fight the duel under the Marabout's conditions at 8 o'clock the following morning. The meeting took place in an open square surrounded by whitewashed buildings. The square was packed with Arabs who hoped to see the Frenchman killed. The Marabout produced his pistols, which he loaded with powder. He offered Robert Houdin a handful of bullets. The Frenchman chose to drop them into the weapons, covered them with paper wads, and thrust them into the barrels with a ramrod. The Marabout had watched every step and felt sure that his adversary could not escape. He took careful aim and pulled the trigger. Robert Houdin smiled and displayed the bullet between his teeth. The Marabout tried to seize the other pistol, but Robert Houdin held him off, saying, "You cannot injure me, but you shall see that my skill is more dangerous than yours. Watch." He fired at the nearest wall. Whitewash flew where the bullet had struck. A gout of blood appeared and dripped down the masonry. He goes on to say, the art of illusion is at least 95% applied psychology. In the duel with the Marabout, psychology accounted for 98% of the effect. The underlying trick was simple. It alone would have puzzled the Arabs, but the dramatic impact would have been lost. And he goes to explain the trick and how Robert Houdin got such a strong illusion out of it. And in this effect, he goes and he breaks through the differences in between doing magic tricks and creating an illusion. Robert Houdin created an illusion that day that he was invincible. The illusion was, and when you count, if you read the David Blaine book, he gives more context, and you can read the original story in Robert Houdin's books. But the original story is just beautiful. They challenge him to a duel, and he sets it up. I won't ruin how he sets it up, but the Algerian gets the first shot. He shoots at Robert Houdin. Robert Houdin catches the bullet between his teeth. He then points his pistol at the Algerian. The Algerian is extremely afraid right now because he knows he's going to die. And instead of shooting him, he turns his pistol and shoots it at a wall. The bullet hits the wall, and blood starts trickling out of that spot of the wall where Robert Houdin hit. And it's almost like this weird spiritual magic effect where that death of the Algerian and of himself is somehow gone to that wall, and you just see the wall bleeding. It's very powerful, and that's sort of what he did. And he talks about, like, how do you create these moments that are more powerful. You see bullet catches these days, and oh man, I've seen a lot of bad bullet catches. I tell you, uh, they're so weak. They're so weak. They go through the procedure. There's no effect. The guys just think about the inherent drama. You set it up on stage where you're bringing an audience member up. You bring your own gun. Okay, we're gonna put the bullet in. I'm gonna catch it with my mouth. There's no purpose. This was a situation. Robert Houdin performed the bullet catch. This was a situation that was natural. He would perform the bullet catch, and now he's been challenged. People think that he can do it for real. Look, you want to do the bullet catch, you're going to get challenged. This is fake. This is a fake gun. This is a fake situation. Let's do it for real. I have my own gun. Let me shoot you with it, which is, by the way, how a few magicians have died throughout the years. People believing it was real and just shooting them with their own guns. So anyways, this was set up in a way where there was really, it really felt real. Like, we're going to come and do a duel. You're going to shoot at me, then I'm going to shoot at you, and we'll see whose magic is stronger. It makes it so much more dramatic. And the guy, when, the Algerian, when he shot and Robert Houdin caught that bullet, it must have been a shock because he must have expected him to die. Okay, well, let's just get into their mindset. Must have expected him to die. He's amazed. And then Robert Houdin pulls out his gun. The Algerian guy, who he's not named, so I'm calling him the Algerian priest or whoever it was, must have been horrified because he must have known, okay, I don't have real magic. I'm about to get shot by this Frenchman. And I can just imagine Robert Houdin pulling his gun and the guy freaking out and almost putting his hands up, like, what do you do? Like, no, this is not how things were supposed to work. Like, I'm not supposed to get shot. I'm supposed to shoot Robert Houdin. Like, I'm not supposed to die like this. So you can imagine the drama in that situation. Robert Houdin, turning that just beautiful, and just I can only imagine being there. It's like one of those situations. Another guy who's really great at creating illusions and the creating power to his pieces was Houdini. Houdini was the same way. He was doing stuff that was set up. Obviously, he's going to be escaping from something. It's going to be set up on some level. People are coming to see the show. People are coming to see him escape. How do you create that environment where people feel that it's really a challenge, that somebody's going to get a piece of rope and tie this guy up or put him in handcuffs? The guy's going to be put underwater and actually be at risk. How do you create that drama? This book right here talks a lot about it, creating that scene, so that when people are watching it, they feel that it's real. And he talks about the difference in between just doing a trick. There's nothing wrong with doing a trick, by the way. He says this. No problem doing a trick, but what the difference is in between doing tricks and creating these illusions, and where it's appropriate to reach out further and create an illusion, where it's appropriate to just do a trick. So that's what this first chapter covers. How to create that drama, how to create that okay, so this isn't about the magic of meaning, but he sort of preludes to it. Talk about the magic of meaning, the meaning of magic. So he says, suppose you could work miracles, like real miracles, right? You could do real magic. You're a real magician. And you snap your fingers, and all of a sudden there's a ham sandwich in somebody's pocket and you point out to them and say, reach inside your pocket, pull out that ham sandwich. Okay? And it's like real magic. There's nothing in his pocket before. Suddenly there's a ham sandwich. It's like, wow, this is pretty cool. This is real magic. Like it's cool. But it is devoid of meaning. It doesn't mean anything. Why is the sandwich in his pocket? Like what? Why did you do that miracle? You could do real magic. You could, perform miracles. Why did you put a sandwich in the guy's pocket? Ham sandwich. And okay, it's meaningless. So he said, like, what if we do it a different way? What if you're a magician? You're just standing around, and all of a sudden, somebody says, "Oh, you're with a group of friends." Somebody says, "Oh man, I'm really hungry. We should go get something. I gotta get something to eat. I gotta get something to eat." And all of a sudden, you say, "Well, what do you like to eat?" I don't know. Usually I have a ham sandwich for lunch. I didn't make one today. I had to leave the house too quickly. Magician says, "Wait, stop." He snaps his fingers. Reach inside your pocket. You were hungry, and now you're not going to be hungry because there's a ham sandwich inside your pocket. Reach inside your pocket. There's a ham sandwich. Oh my god! It's amazing, and so Henning Nelms talks about this. How most of the most celebrated plots in magic, the celebrated classics, have no point. They have absolutely no point. They're just done. Like, why are four aces jumping from one pile to another? Like, why? Why do we mix what and oil and water? Why are the cards separating? Why is that bill? Why do you borrow a bill, sign it, and then find an element? Why? Why does the bill disappear? Why does it disappear? And why does it end up at 11? Where did you get to 11? Like, why is this happening? Why? Like, this doesn't make sense. Why are these things happening? So Henning Nelms realizes this. Like, we're doing impossible things most of the time for no reason. We're just introducing these plots. Look, I'm going to introduce these objects. We're going to put something over here, something magical happens. It doesn't happen for a reason. It's just, it's almost nonsensical. We create magic that's logical, but that's devoid of meaning. We create magic that makes sense intuitively. You look at it, but it's devoid of meaning. Why is this happening? What is the purpose of this? Like, let's say you do a gambling routine, okay? Or let's say you're a character. Or we're just going to skip ahead. Let's say you're a character, the character you play in a theater is the man. Okay, hold on. Before I go into that, I'll give you two examples. You're doing a gambling routine. That's your show. You're a gambling expert, okay? You're doing gambling demonstrations. You're always winning blackjack, poker, euchre, in any game that you're doing. You're rolling dice. You're always winning, and you are showing off how skillful you are. Okay. It's amazing. You could even say it's happening by magic if you don't want to go through the skill direction. Okay? It's one way. What's the point of it? The audience is watching you win over and over and over again. Why is the audience interested in watching you win? Okay? That's one direction. And we see people do it all the time. And then there's another direction. This is an example from my own mind. I thought it would be a great character. If you were a character and your character was lucky, you were literally the man who could not lose. The man who couldn't lose. And that was your character. No matter what game you play, no matter how bad the odds are, you somehow come on top. You're the luckiest man alive. The man who could not lose. And it gives such a great meaning. You tell, you have a deck of cards, you tell the spectator, shuffle. You shuffle, you cut. Gil, what game do you want to play? You want to play blackjack, poker? What do you want to play? They name the game. Okay, how many players? Deal them out. Deal them out. Look, look, look. I don't care. You can switch cards. I'm the luckiest man in the world. I don't do anything, but I win every single time. You win. Okay, you win, you win, you win. It gives it more meaning. It gives a narrative. What if you went one step further? What if you told them? What if there was a point of your gambling? You had an audience member. You made it exciting for the audience. Most times when people are doing gambling demonstrations against the magician puts up money. The magician will put $50 on the table, $100, whatever. Says, look, if you beat me, you get to win this money, right? You get to win this money. And the audience knows that the layman is never going to win. The layman's never going to win that $50, $100. The magician always wins. He's lucky. He's too skillful. He puts them at the end of the trick. He puts that money back in his pocket. Says, "Oh, I've been doing this for 20 years. With the same bill. I've never lost it." Yeah, we know this, right? What if we made it different? What if the magician put $50? What if the magician, depending on the amount for the audience, let's say there's 20 spectators, okay? Magician puts $50. The magician puts $20. 20 audience members, $20. He puts it down in singles, $20. He tells this to the spectator, if you beat me, you get this $20. You get all of it. You get every single dollar. If I win, the audience wins. If I win, everybody in the audience gets $1. That way, okay, this is the way I think about it. That way, you're going to win either way. It's not impressive if you don't win as a magician. You have to win. But that way, the audience wants you to win because you're winning. I guess it's the soccer game. People are losing it out here. Really screaming. You guys can't. It's either there's a soccer game or somebody's being murdered. Okay, but here's the idea. You have to win in a gambling demonstration or there's no point. Imagine if you make the audience want you to win by giving away money when you win. I think it is soccer. So that's the idea I had for that character, which gives it more meaning. It makes people want to be on your side, want you to win. And it's just such a brilliant thing. It hasn't been explored. I had a whole concept for the show. I didn't do it. It's not my character, but everybody who comes into the show is included with their price of admission. Right? They pay $20 for the show, whatever. One of the things they get when they sit down is a lottery ticket, one of those little scratch lottery tickets. And it's random. It's a real lottery ticket, but at the end of the show, you bring everybody up and you do like a magic thing, and you lay your hands on all the lottery tickets and you tell them somebody here is going to win more money than they paid. So you bring people up, and there's people. The person who believes in luck the most is going to be the luckiest. So just put your energy, whatever, into the lottery ticket. And you have everybody in the audience scratch their lottery ticket. Who won $1? Who won $2? What do we have? $3. You won $5. You won $20. $50. Stand up. Show everybody. You won $50. You paid $20. You saw the show. We won. You won $1. Now you want $50. This is the luckiest show on earth. You build it up. You build it up. It's a presentation thing. So, anyways, back to the book because I'm getting a little crazy here. Back to the book. How do we put meaning in what we're doing? How do we make people involved? How do we get them excited? How do we make them want to believe in the premise? If I went to a magic show and I saw a gambler, yeah, it's interesting to me that he's always controlling every hand. He never loses. It's interesting. Good for him. Good for him. I want it to be about the people. What do the people feel? And that's what this book is about. This is what it's about: bringing the audience into the presentations. Let me read this comment here. Cannot lose my dramatic show. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, giving the money is brilliant. Yeah. Another idea I had, which I'll tell you guys, but don't tell anyone. I'm working on it for my next show. So the idea is to do a money transformation. Where you're turning a money changing routine, where you turn a $1 into a $5 and a $10 and $100. So what I want to do is there's a man who's homeless outside of the theater. Instead of just doing the trick, there's a man homeless outside of the theater. There's a hidden camera on him. He's part of the show. He's actually homeless, probably homeless. He's part of the show though. There's a camera on him hidden. Everybody walks into the theater and everybody ignores him. Maybe somebody gives him money, right? On the day somebody gives him money, that's their lucky day. Because during the show, I'm gonna play a video. This is my friend. This is my friend Robert. He's down on his luck. He actually lives on the streets. Not only does he live on the streets, but he actually sits on this street right here every single day, asking for a little bit of money so he can eat, and he just uses it to eat. He doesn't, and he's sitting out here, and we actually set up a camera, and this is all of you guys walking before the show. This is all you guys entering the show. A lot of people ignore him, don't make eye contact with you. I don't blame you guys. I don't blame you. It's very hard. This city is filled with homeless people on the streets, and you can't give it money. You can't help everybody, and you don't know what their life is like. Whatever, I'm present it. But one of you did something for this man. I bring the homeless guy, Robert, on stage. One of you did something for this man. Robert, what happened? And when I'm playing the video, Robert pulls out $5, whatever. Somebody here gave you some money. Who gave you the money? We watch on the camera. The person who gave him money is in the audience right now. Sir, would you please stand up? You gave him $5. Why did you give him $5? Do you usually give homeless people $5? What made you give him $5? Because I know how hard it is. We pass by homeless people every single day. You gave him $5. $5 is, $5 can't go very far. In reality, $5 can't go very far. But we're not in reality right now. We're in a magic show. In a magic show, we can do the impossible. So let's go a little bit further. Robert, would you please hand me that $5? I'll, you might get it back. Robert hands me the $5. I turn it into two $50 bills. I give Robert $150. I give the guy from the audience a $50. And anyways, the idea, I haven't fully thought it out. I haven't scripted it, but the idea is you're not just turning money. One of the greatest things, you're not just creating money, for no reason and then putting it in your pocket. That's how magicians usually do it. Okay, can I borrow $5? They turn it into $100. They put the $100 back in their pocket and they give the guy $5, because they don't want to lose money. As part of the show. One of the greatest things that I saw David Blaine do, and it made it so meaningful when he did, I forget what it's called, the Hundy 500, or there's one of these bill effects where you have a stack of bills, they're all ones, and then you flip them over and they turn into $100 bills. And he did that, I believe in New Orleans or somewhere in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. People's houses were destroyed, and it was just a mess. And he went up to a family's house and he knocked on the door, and they're like, "Who is this guy?" And he says, "Look, can I have, how much money do you have?" And whatever. They give him $5. all in $1 bills, and he says, watch, and he turns it into each bill into $100 bills. He gives it out to them. It's like so meaningful. It just changes the dynamic. And I thought, like, how can we get people involved in the magic that we're doing? We don't need to necessarily give them money, right? We don't need to give them money for every single effect, but this is an example how we can draw people in. It's an example. Or if you don't want to give money to the audience, you have money for charity. Say, look, you invite a charity for every single show. This is this charity. We invited them to the show, and they're we want to help promote what they're doing, and we talk about it a little bit, and you do your gambling thing like that. I thought it was very interesting. Either way, it's good for business. You do a little charity, good promotion, and everybody wants a charity to win, right? There's nobody who's going to be voting for that single spectator to win. Even that spectator is going to want you to win. Yeah. Anyways, so we go into meaning here. And Henning Nelms says the degree of interest that spectators take in any performance is in direct proportion to its meaning for them. Pay very close attention to that. For its meaning to them, it's not enough that the performance means something, that what you're presenting means something. It has to mean something to them. It needs to mean something to them. You can do a presentation and a beautiful show, and you can do it about something, and nobody will care because they don't feel connected. How can it connect to them? How does it, what does it mean to them? A lot of people say Houdini was very successful because it was a very tough, time in humanity. They had just gotten, he was performing during the First World War. And after that, going into the recession, not everybody, but most people were down on their luck, did not have a lot of money, and just didn't feel like they could escape their situation. Like there was no way out. And here's this guy who comes along, and he's this, immigrant from Hungary, and he can escape anything. Anything that people throw on him, he can escape. Like, just think about that metaphor. And through that, he becomes, world famous and wealthy. He has money, and he's, traveling the world. What does that mean for people? We have to think about what these things mean for people. Why are we doing this? What does it mean? All right, let's go on. This is a book that is so, it's impossible for me to talk about the whole book because it's so thick and dense, but I just want to get the lessons out of it. And so this is where the showmanship come in. So he says you need three things. I think everybody says you need different things, but it says you need meaning, you need showmanship, and you need technique. So let's get past the technique. Technique is, what makes a trick work? This is just the bare bones. How does this work? How do we get from point A to point B? That's the technique stuff. The meaning, what is it that we're trying to present? Like, what is that emotion? What is that emotional connection that's binding us with the audience? Why do they care about what they're seeing? What does it mean to them? What does it represent? By the way, not everything needs to mean something, but for this example, that's what we're talking about. And showmanship, which is how do we create that atmosphere where what we're doing means something? It's so easy to do something. I see it all the time. People write really deep, meaningful, philosophical presentations. You read it, they send you their scripts. Oh, I have friends of mine, send me their scripts. And it's very rich on paper. You read it on paper, it comes to life. It's amazing. and then you see them perform it, and it's dead. It does not come across. This is where showmanship comes in. There's a lot of shows that are brilliant on paper, and then when you see the real thing, it's like, not so good, not so good. And that's where showmanship comes in. How do you bring those pieces to life? How do you make them connect? Why is it that Darren Brown, David Blaine, the great magicians, why is it that they can get such strong reactions off very, very simple pieces a lot of times? And other people try to duplicate those pieces, and they don't get 1% of the effect out of it. How do we make people feel what we want them to feel? And a lot of that is showmanship. It's right here in this book, talking a lot about it. Henning Nelms says, when showmanship is carried far enough, it can actually even create an illusion of meaning where none exists. For example, and he talks about Houdini and the needle trick, which is, for most people doing it, nonsensical. All right, guys, this is what I'm going to do. I have a bunch of needles, I got some thread. I'm going to put the needles all in my mouth. I'm going to swallow them. And then I have this thread here, and I'm also going to swallow it. And then I'm going to pull it out. And the packet of needles is going to be strung onto the thread. How does this work? What is the premise? What is the meaning? Am I, is a performer tying those little knots with his tongue? Is he doing it somehow deep down in his throat, in his stomach? Is it magically happening? And what is the throat just a container? Could he equally have a little bag or a box? Or he says somebody to open your hands. Look, I'm going to put all these needles inside. I'm going to put all these threads inside. Close your hands. Watch. Open your hands, and they're all attached to or he puts the same thing. He puts them in a box. They're not attached, and then you open the box again. They're attached. What is the meaning? What is the meaning, right? What is happening here? This is something in magic that people don't think about. We look at the grand effect. This is the magic effect, but why is this happening? We need to ask questions. We need to ask questions to other magicians who are creating material, and we have to ask questions to ourselves who are presenting and also creating the material. Why are we doing it in these ways? All right, I'm going to get off this. I could talk about the needle, but to be honest, there's no point going on and on about it. Just because, really, let's talk about a needle trick. It's another trick that's done a lot, very underwhelming. Needle trick, bullet catch, two tricks that are actually very dangerous. And why do they get such small effects most of the time? What did Houdini do? Houdini's needle trick? I'll tell you Houdini's needle trick. So Houdini's needle trick started with him talking about how he could make any part of his body resilient to pain. He would talk about how he trained in the mystic arts that he learned in the East, and he could make any part of his body invincible. He said, let's try it. Bring up these needles. You can stick a needle into any place on my face. Stick a needle any place on my face, and it will not hurt me because I've trained not to feel the pain. The only place you cannot stick the needle is my eyeballs because I'm not strong enough yet to resist the pain in my eyeballs. But you can put the needle anywhere on my face, and I'll be able to resist it. And he'd have a little pincushion with needles, and people would come up from the audience, there'd be about 30 needles. People would come. Maybe there was more than 30 needles. I should look at how many needles he did. But he did a lot of needles. Come up one by one, stick him with a needle in the face. And mind you, back then, acupuncture existed, but only I think it only existed in the Asian communities, like the Chinese community, and the regular the citizens of Britain and American, the people who were not from Asia had no idea about acupuncture. So when they saw a man getting stuck with needles in his face, they were like, he's invincible. He's getting stabbed in the face with needles. Nowadays, I think it would be less impressive, still impressive, but less impressive, because people know about acupuncture. And a lot of people have tried acupuncture, and they know that it doesn't hurt as much as, there's less of a taboo around it, stigma. Like, people aren't afraid. Imagine Houdini's time. He's doing all these crazy stuff, escaping, being punched, hanged upside down by a straitjacket. Yeah, he's getting needles stuck in his face. The guy's a super freak. He can handle it. And then he has them, after they stuck a needle, stand up on stage with him. They created like a little committee. He asks if there's a dentist. There's a dentist in the audience. Come on up. Look inside my mouth. Here's a little flashlight. Here's a little thing. Look inside my mouth. My mouth is empty, correct? Yes, look all the way around. We're going to put the needles in one by one, one by one, one by one. I'm going to swallow them. Look inside my mouth. Is it empty? Look, really look. You're the dentist. You have to tell everyone. Not everybody can see in my mouth. I'm far on stage. Everybody look. You have to check. Is there anything in my mouth? There's nothing in my mouth. Let's put more needles. Swallow more. Check again. Okay, let's finish it. All the needles. Swallow it. Check again. There's nothing in my mouth. It's gone. Pass me that thread. Houdini swallows the thread. Look in my mouth. My mouth is empty, correct? Yes. And then he regurgitates it one by one. This is a piece in a Houdini show that would take apparently 10 to 12 minutes. I got to research more about this piece that Houdini did. He did it to music, and it was slow. When the needles would come out, they would come out very slowly, and his assistants would come and hold the needle, and they'd walk across the stage and create like a giant. It would just be like a giant. I don't know. I don't know what you call this, a giant thread of needles, just huge, going across the stage back and forth. And you could, with the lighting on the stage lighting, just bounce off those glistening needles. I'm sure he used like some sort of chrome needles or silver, something that has a really nice shine. When the light hits it, it just pops. So you just see all these little sparks from the stage, just flying all over the stage. And he really created it into a masterpiece. And how do we do that? How do we do that for our tricks instead of just doing them the way we're used to doing them? Mr. Suki says John Allen or Francis Minetti. He can't remember. Has great presentation for swallowing needle tricks. I'll look it up. So there's that. Okay, so he talks about direction and misdirection, how there's no such thing as misdirection. He says technique covers the conjurer's manner of presentation, how he moves, how he speaks, what he says, his timing, and the skill which he conceals any devices that may be necessary. In an ideal performance, the spectator should be able to follow the ideas of an illusion step by step. Nothing should be allowed to divert their attention to anything else. In most cases, any lack of polish on the part of the performer becomes a distraction. So I think when people get into magic, or people who don't know magic, feel that misdirection is a distraction, like the magician does something, where everybody looks in one way and then he does something secretly somewhere else on the stage. So like he'll have a really pretty girl walk on stage, everyone will look at the pretty girl, and someone else will climb into a box. In reality, that's not how misdirection works. The direction is, direction. Things being the magician taking you through a narrative, taking you through a plot. This is what's happening. You're following every single point. Okay, this is the magician. These are the props. This is what's happening, and then leading to that conclusion. And the you don't want distractions between that. You don't want to do a ambitious card routine, right, where you lose a card in the middle of the deck, or the spectator pushes the card in the middle of the deck, and then you put the deck down and you talk for 20 minutes, because the audience is distracted. They're looking at you. They're hearing the story. They don't know what's going on with the deck. After 20 minutes, I don't know what's happened to the deck, even though the deck's been in my view. The more time there is in between those actions, the attention is diverted, even if it's in front of you the whole time. That's why I have a problem. And many times you see these mentalism shows, or shows with mentalism. They have that lockbox hanging from the ceiling, and it's in front of the audience the whole time, but it's ignored. And then the magician pulls it down, and there's a prediction inside. It ends up matching with what the audience said earlier on the show. To me, I mean, it's a very strong puzzle. It's a puzzle. It's like, how the hell did that happen? Like how the heck did that happen? They're not feeling that their attention was focused on this the whole time. Imagine how much more powerful it would be if the magician all of a sudden wrote something, puts it inside an envelope. He tells a spectator, put this in your pocket right now. Put it inside your pocket. There's only one envelope inside your pocket, nothing else. Now, tell me a story. And the spectator tells the mentalist a story. And right at the end of the story, not 2 minutes later, not 3 minutes, 30 seconds later, immediately after the story is over, he says, tell me a quick story that's about 30 seconds long. Right at the end of the 30 seconds, reach into your pocket, pull out that paper, pull out that envelope, open it, and you're going to see something amazing inside that envelope. Can you imagine how much more powerful that effect would be, rather than this thing hanging in the air and we don't focus on it? We're not it's there. We're not aware of it. Anything could happen. It's in the void. It's in this dark space here. Yeah, we can see it, but we know, even though we don't know what's happening or how the secret, even though we don't know how the information's secretly going there, we know that it's like, even though we don't understand it, we know, that's how the audience feels. We know you somehow got it in. It's a puzzle, right? Where was I? I'm getting myself off track. Oh, that's funny. That is funny. So either John Alling or Francis Menotti, I'll have to look this up. For the needle trick, he had a big TV with an animation with a small little human inside his stomach, his body, putting the needles on the thread. That's funny. All right, let's go on through the book. We are going so slow through the book. This is going to take a long time. He goes through tricks. He's always giving demonstrations with these tricks. Some of them are pretty cool. Talking more about tricks and illusions. All right. Okay. I'm gonna go on. Sorry. I'm trying to think of how to present this. It's so complex. Um, okay, so he talks about magicians. That's chapter 2, deception versus conviction. Uh, the short version of it is he talks about how magicians usually try to fool their audiences. They're trying to deceive them. They're trying to make their tricks work, fool the audiences, and that's what their goal is. And he talks about people who direct plays and movie directors, people who are creating a show for people, not a magic show. They're trying to create a story that sucks people in, that makes people feel that it's real. You know, you'll go to a play or an opera or see a movie, and you'll see a movie where there's a couple in love, and all of a sudden, one of the lovers gets sick. They develop cancer, and the whole film is them slowly deteriorating, getting more and more sick. You're watching this. It's so real. It's so sad. You know, they're at the hospital bed crying. They're never going to be able to continue their life together. You're watching this. It's sad. You might even cry. You'll feel it. Like you just feel it. It's real to you. Reality. Those are actors. It's Hollywood. You know, they're making a movie. It's makeup. The person's actually not dying. It's makeup. It's a script. It's not real. But for the audience watching it, it's real. Even though they know it's not real, it's real. The cry. That movie, any movie really, could have a strong effect on people's lives because you got to go. Okay, see you, man. You'll catch this live stream later, the rest of it later. Have a good day, man. Uh, they create a situation where the audience really does feel that it's real, and they experience it in that way, and they know that it's fake. For us, we have the same thing. For our audiences to feel that our magic is real doesn't mean for them to believe it's real. They don't need to believe, let's say you're doing a levitation. Okay. They don't need to believe that you're actually levitating or you're making that girl levitate. As long as they don't need to know that it's real. They know that it's not real. But you want them to feel that it's real. You want them to experience those emotions. And that's what the showmanship is. And building that atmosphere, conviction, building that conviction with the audience member. And this conviction is so strong. Depending on how you use it, magicians use it for negatives and positives. One is making somebody feel like something impossible is happening. The opposite is just as strong when the audience, is saying, no, 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 no. Like, the card is lost, and they know that the card on the table, there's a card, they know it's not their card. That card has been signed, that card has been lost. They know it's not on the table. They saw the card on the table. You tell them it's the one on the table. They say, no, no. That's their conviction. No. And then you show it to them. Yes. It's all about using these convictions and building them up so that we get an impact from what we're doing. And this is what this chapter is about. You go see a puppet show. You go see a ventriloquist, a great ventriloquist. It seems real. That puppet, you know that the puppet is just the guy's hand and he's doing a fake voice with his mouth. His lips are moving, but he's talking. He's talking with a puppet. I can't do it. I can't do it. But we watch this and it feels real. You know that it's a little doll, but he feels alive. he's turning around, he's looking, his hands are moving, he's joking, he's making jokes at the expense of the puppeteer. He's laughing at the audience. He feels alive. Even though we know it's not real, it doesn't matter because it feels real and we're getting that experience. Now that Henning Nelms is saying that's how magic should be. We're not trying to convince the world of a lie. We're making them experience. We're trying to get them to experience something that we're creating that's beautiful. All right. And there's different ways of doing that. Some of the ways of creating those illusions, those convictions, are more realistic, and some of them are more based in fantasy. Uh, we know this. Like, let's say you have a very simple routine. Very simple. Spectator signs a card. And by signing the card, that becomes their card. It becomes tied to them. They can shuffle the deck. They can whatever. Every single time they spread the deck on the table, they'll go down, touch a card, pull it out, turn it over. It will be their card. Every single card in the deck is different. They always choose that same card. It's their card. It's magical. It's beautiful. Now that's realistic. They know it's not magic. Like, there's nothing impossible happening. They're just very lucky. It's mathematics. Like, they're not feeling it's impossible, but they, they know they know that it's possible, but it feels impossible. Whereas in a fantasy presentation, you have the effect. Opposite effect. You're doing something impossible, and you're making them feel that you're doing the impossible. When you do a levitation, they know levitation's impossible. It's not like it's improbable. He might levitate. If he just float, if he just rises a little bit, he might float. They know it's impossible, and so talk about those differences in this book, how you can use them. He gives us an example, and he talks about it later in the making the most of an assistant uh, chapter. Conviction not only makes your performance more impressive, it makes deception much easier. And he gives this example of a play which had magic in it called The Charlatan. And the actor who was playing the magician was not a magician. He couldn't do anything. The real magician in the show was the character who played a lawyer, and the lawyer was constantly trying to expose the magician in the play. So every single time the magician would set it down a pot or put down something, the lawyer would always sneak behind him and examine it in front of the audience, so the audience could see, oh, the lawyer's checking everything out. Meanwhile, the lawyer in this play was a real magician, sneaking everything that needed to be snuck in under the pot, doing all the sleight of hand and technical work. And the magician in the play was taking all the credit. He was this amazing conjurer. He didn't have to do anything. He put this down here. Amazing stuff would happen. And he talks about how the conviction was so strong that no one even suspected the lawyer doing anything because he's so good at playing his character of this guy who's trying to investigate and wants to catch this magician out that he nobody catches him doing those moves. All right, we have let's keep going. Ooh, it is so hot where I am. No idea. Oh, I went back in pages. That's why I didn't know where I was. Keep going forward. Sorry. All right. Talks about atmosphere. The first step towards conviction consists in inducing a suspension of disbelief. That is done by establishing an atmosphere in which the illusion will seem plausible. It's all about doing stuff that seems plausible with the rules of the game that you introduce. You're the magician. They're coming into your world, and you have to establish that world. I wrote an article on it for Before Magic for Fred Capps. Talk about creating that atmosphere where people's worlds, you're bringing people out of their own world and their own reality, and then you're bringing them into this magical reality, which is where your magic lives. And how we do that. We do that. Sorry, I'm reading while I've read this this far already. I just trying to find some lines that will stimulate me. Um, Here we're talking about personality. Who? One of the pieces of advice that he gives in this book, which is so great, when you're trying to develop your character, is really, the best way, honestly, take video of your performance, look at who you are, look at your body type, look at how you sound when you speak, uh, listen, and look at who you fit. Like, who do you look like? Maybe there's a character in a movie that you look like, or like, just think, if I were an actor, what roles would I be cast at? Would I be cast as a big, mafioso? Would I be cast as a, really smart guy? You look at the guy, what's his name, Jesse Eisenberg, who played in the Now You See Me movies. He also played Mark Zuckerberg in the Facebook movie, the social network. He has a look. He has a look of like this. He has a very weird look, but it's a look. And when he plays roles, you're like, he is that guy. He is that guy. Like, you're convinced. Yeah, that's Jesse Eisenberg. He's that's actually a funny story. Jesse Eisenberg. I actually met him when I went to Steve Cohen's show in New York. I brought it was me and a dear friend of mine. We went to go see the show together, and Jesse Eisenberg was there, and Steve Cohen was doing the show, and he was hanging out, and it was just anyways, got to meet him after the show. It's pretty cool. But yeah, who do you look like? What role would you fit? And the advice that he gives in this book is really great. He says, go up to your friends and just ask them, and bring a piece of paper and a notebook. Just ask them to name movies where you would fit in, like characters in movies and TV shows where you would fit in. Like, what is your personality like? What are you like? Where would you fit in? And then look at that. And they might be right, they might be wrong. Sometimes people are wrong. They might tell you something that you hate, like, you look like Ross from Friends. And you're like, oh, screw that. They might tell you something that you don't want to hear, but just listen to what they say and hear them and evaluate, what is my character going to be? Who am I when I'm performing? what makes sense with the magic that I'm doing? Am I doing real magic? Is it a trick? Am I just like am I a real magician? Am I just a sophisticated guy who's doing sleight of hand? Like, am I doing real magic? What am I doing? Who am I? Ask yourself these questions. And the book shows you how to ask yourself these questions. Because it's like one of the most difficult things, choosing your character, choosing what your character can and cannot do. So, for instance, for my character, when I'm performing, I I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a psychic, right? But I do mentalism, and the way I do mentalism is through magic. And I'll tell you guys this. Don't share it. So I do the drawing duplication, and the way I do the drawing duplication is I have it where I'm reading the ink. So we have a drawing, and they're drawing, and they are dipping their ink from that paper and from that pen into water, and I'm feeling that water with my arm that's dipped inside the ink mixed with water. And from feeling that, my body moves automatically on that paper, drawing out what I need to draw out. My body is connecting with the ink, the same source that's drawing that other drawing. It's somehow being transferred to me. That's the presentation. That's how I'm doing mentalism. Or when I do, out of this world or other mental type routines with cards. Many times it's based on hypnotism. I'm looking at people and I'm reading them. They don't know how I'm reading them. I don't make it clear. I'm not saying I'm reading their mind. I just look at them and I'm saying things. And I let them guess what I'm doing. I want them to argue among themselves. Is he hypnotizing us? Is he reading our minds? I want them to argue. Are we hallucinating? Is this all just a hallucination? Especially when the card magic gets into it. Like, what's going on? Very interesting stuff. So choose who you are when you're performing magic. What the limits of you need limits. You need you can't be all powerful, because if you play a character that's all powerful, you're going to end up disappointing your audience because you can't do anything. You're very limited in how you present your magic for most plots, for most tricks, most effects. That's why there's a procedure, So you have to, if you could do anything, your magic would just be amazing. You'd just be like, snap your fingers and magical stuff would be happening all over the audience. Okay, these people on this side of the audience, you're only going to speak French from now on. On this side of the audience, you're all of a sudden, all your clothes are going to turn blue. Everybody's going to be wearing all blue shirts, blue pants, blue socks, blue shoes, blue hats. Okay, like that's what real magic would be like. You just snap your finger and it would happen. We don't have that type of power as magicians. Our power is very limited. There's rules to how we can perform magic. There's rules and limits to our powers. So we need to establish for ourselves and for our audience, what are the limits to our powers? We can still do anything, but in a more subdued fashion. So we need to get that out of the way and make that clear to the audience. Okay, this is talking more about the characters. Because whatever character you take on, you you want it to be real for people when they're watching it. You don't want them to you don't necessarily want them to believe the magic that you're doing is real 100% because that's a little too much, I think, to ask in most situations. But you want them to feel that you as a character is real when you're on stage. And you can either have like a character act where you're literally a character, you're dressed up in funny clothes, and you're not your real self, or you can have a more subdued. As Canio used to call it, the what did he call it? It's like an improved version of yourself. You are yourself, but you're a little bit more charming. You're a little bit more funny. You're a little bit more suave and sophisticated. You're, you're yourself, but like an idealized version of yourself. And there's different approaches. You can be all sorts of characters, and it depends. Some of the characters you have to adapt and take it off stage. For example, Darren Brown. Darren Brown is known as a psychological illusionist type guy, and people expect him when he's in public. Yeah, he's reading me. He knows what I'm thinking. He can play with my mind. But when Darren Brown goes out in public, I'm sure that most people who know his work will have that feeling about him. Like, they won't feel like, he's just a regular guy. They'll be thinking, he's analyzing stuff. He's a mind machine. Let's keep an eye on him. So it's all about what character you want to present. And just because you have a character like that doesn't mean that it's like a bad thing. Like, for example, Uri Geller, another example, it's more difficult because he always has to be on, but he doesn't always have to be. If somebody asks him to do something or he's put in a challenging situation, he can just tell them, I'm not feeling it. My energy is not very strong today. I can't do it. And he can get away with that. So again, it's all about like, who are you? And whatever character you are, you might want to consider carrying it off stage as well, carrying it on off stage. In some situations, it's not necessary. If you are, Penn and Teller or Piff the Magic Dragon or David Copperfield, I feel like for those guys, people aren't expecting them to be doing magic under every circumstance. They'll feel like, just, see him in a coffee shop and be able to, relax. Like David Copperfield is not making, no one's, David Copperfield's driving from Vegas from his house to the theater. Somebody pulls up just beside him in traffic at the stoplight. I'm pretty sure nobody looks over and thinks, "Oh my goodness, David Copperfield, he's going to make my car vanish." Like, I don't feel that's what people are feeling when they look at David Copperfield. So it's all about how to find balance in who you are, your character, and how you're doing it. Another great thing he talks about in this book is casting the audience. How do you choose the volunteers? How do you choose your audience? Are you working for men? Are you working for women? Are you working for children? Where are you working? Who's the audience? How do you pick volunteers? How do you pick good volunteers? And talks from his experiences. Here's the thing: I don't think you should follow his guidance too much in picking volunteers. He sort of gives you safe examples, but I don't think he has very much experience on stage for magic. There are some people who want really calm volunteers for their magic. David Copperfield wants calm volunteers. He wants volunteers who are going to listen. David Copperfield is super sharp. He will not pick anybody from the audience that he thinks is going to have any sort of problem or just anything. He screens them out. So those people never make it up on stage. Other people, for instance, use the opposite example. Danny Ortiz. Danny Ortiz might want somebody a little funnier on stage because it adds to his dynamic. He's doing close-up magic, and he's not bringing somebody to examine a big prop. He's joking around with somebody. So it really depends on what type of magic you do and how you interact with your audience. I think that's how you're going to dictate which volunteers come up. I personally love every single volunteer that comes up. They really change. I'll do the same routine and the spectators. Making the most of assistance. If you're doing, he talks about assistant stooges. You want your assistant, I'm just going to say it, I don't care if it's politically correct. You want your assistant to look good. You want them to be in shape. You don't, there's certain types of people you don't want to be your assistant. You don't want somebody who's distracting. You want somebody who's a good actor or actress. They have to be amazed or amused, or they need to react. They cannot just, it's one of the hardest things. The assistant is a part of the show. So when they're seeing parts of the show, it's not amazing for them. And the audience doesn't expect them to be amazed because it's fake. If the assistant is amazed, it just means that, like, why is the assistant amazed? Like, they should know what's happening in the show. They should have seen this 1,000 times. Why are they amazed? They know that it's fake. If the assistant is on the other extreme, completely deadpan, you do a beautiful levitation, and the assistant is just standing there like this. It doesn't work out. People are looking at the system like, well, why isn't the system reacting to this? So you need to figure out with your assistants how they're going. They are out. It's a magic show. They don't want to rehearse. They don't want to learn the secret code. They don't want to do anything. And he talks about how you can make it interesting so that your assistants will be interested in doing your show with you and practicing with you. And part of that is giving them a role, giving them a job that they can be successful at and succeed at and be rewarded for, that they can feel proud of. Nobody just wants to stand around handing the magician stuff. Okay, let me go backstage, get that box, bring it out. Okay. Now at this point of the show, okay, that trick's gonna end. I'm gonna wheel that prop up stage, hand the magician this. It's depressing for most assistants because they're just used as they're not part of the show. They're like vending machines. Like, you could literally replace them with these arms from like robots that you see in the vending machines. That you have a little thing here. You put in the money. You press the combination, and then the robot arm grabs the bag of chips and brings it over to you. The exact same thing. That's how magicians use assistants. No wonder they hate being part of the magic shows. So he talks a lot about this and how you might want to have characters and different things in your show that are fake, but the audience doesn't know they're fake. For example, you have a spectator come up, and they're not a real spectator. They're part of your show, but they come up to examine something, and there's a funny moment in the show. Like David Copperfield when he does that the duck trick. I forget the duck's name, where he has that duck with the chain around the duck's neck, and it's a gold chain, and he puts the duck in the bucket, makes it vanish, and he has a slow motion track with the Chariots of Fire music going. Anyway, early on in that museum, there's a kid crying apparently in the audience, and he yells into the audience, "Oh, somebody shut that kid up!" This is David Copperfield. And then David Copperfield does a trick, and it's amazing. And then somebody from the audience yells, "Do it again! Do it again!" David's like, "Huh? Do the trick again!" David's like, you want me, you guys, you want me to do the trick again?" Everyone's like, yeah, do the trick." And then the guy yells again, no, do it in slow motion. And everybody in the audience laughs, and David's like, you want me to do the trick in slow motion? And yeah, do it in slow motion. So then David Copperfield does it in slow motion. Now, the great thing about that is it's a part of the show that's scripted. It's like, the audience sort of gets clued in on the scripted, but they go along with it. They're okay with having that fake member in the audience yelling out those things because it makes the show better. They enjoy it. It doesn't take away. It's not used for a deceptive purpose. It's not like, oh, this person is secretly in the audience and they're feeding the magician information. No, it just makes the show funnier, and the people understand that, which is why it's such a great piece of the show. David Copperfield's been doing it for like, I don't know, 40 years, maybe more. I remember him doing it in the 70s. Even though I was not alive in the 70s, I have access to some videos from then. All right, let's continue on. There's so much to talk about. Talks about Confederates and how people don't use Confederates. Confederates aren't considered to be fair. Talks about that. I have my own feeling on Confederates. Might do a thing where I talk about Confederates in the future, but it's too long to get in today. Want to get to the next chapter, which is Casting the Spell, chapter 6, which is what I was talking about. The magician giving people the feel of magic. When I do my drawing duplication, the way I do it is I have somebody draw. I have a thing of ink, and I have some water, and I have a quilt and a pen. I have this old piece of parchment, and I have them draw what they're going to draw on the piece of paper, whatever, with the quill. Sometimes I do it with a pen. Sometimes I do it. Depends. I have them draw it and sealed inside an envelope. I use the Arthur Buckley trick. We can talk about it in the future. Drop that envelope into this vase. I guess you could call it a vase. It's a sort of a vase of oil and water. It's literally oil and water. Ink, not oil. Ink, not oil. If I used oil, it would be so toxic. Ink, not oil. And then once I let it swirl around a bit, and I'm feeling there's music, and my arm is in that ink. I pull it out, and I don't even look at what I'm drawing. I just feel it, and then go. And the idea is that oil is absorbing what's in that drawing, and it's transmitting it to me. I'm somehow absorbing that energy or that picture. That's the idea. And so that's what this whole chapter is about, casting the spell. How can we do stuff that feels like real magic, but it's not real magic? And he talks about using pendulums, using magical props like Aladdin's lamp. Everybody knows the story of Aladdin. He goes to rub that lamp, and then the genie comes out and he gives him 3 wishes. He talks about the wand, the magician's wand, which is so iconic. I'm actually getting a wand. I'm going to have a wand made, just a very simple wand for my magic. And I'm not going to use it always. But for some tricks, I'm going to figure out where I can fit it in because it's so iconic that you sort of need to have it. I want to do a trick with the wand. Just hold it either way. Even when I'm not using it, I want the wand to be on my person, just to give people that thought, like maybe the wand is giving him power. People usually just use the wand and the cups and balls and they're using it to conceal, those balls. It's easier to conceal those balls with the wand in your hand. It keeps your hand busy. And he talks about this and how it's, the wrong approach totally, how you should be using that wand to give people that feeling of magic, even, outside of the cups and balls. People know that wands are magical. That's why they're in Harry Potter. Harry Potter cannot do any good magic without his wand. And nobody can. You always see them like struggling without their wands. For the most part, I think most of the high-powered spells in Harry Potter require wands. I'm not sure though. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Harry Potter. He talks about spells, how using spells in your magic. I used to do a thing where when I was reading minds, I would ask people, hold out your hand or just look at me. And as they were looking at me, or I was looking at their hands, I would just move my mouth. Like I wasn't saying anything, but I would just move my mouth and I would mumble. I would just be like, I'd say, look into my eyes. You're thinking of that number, right? Okay, just look at me. It's like you're talking to them, but you're not. They're not hearing you, but they understand that something is going on, and it makes it feel real. Like, what is going on? It's like he's having a conversation. I don't know what they think, but they feel like something's happening here. This is some real magic. He also talks about using sigils and different. Oh shoot! I just dropped my bookmark. Different symbols, like magical symbols. I would be very careful doing that stuff. I think most people, first of all, I wouldn't use it. I don't want to associate my magic with occult magic. Like people who actually believe in real magic spells. I don't want my magic to be associated with that. And so I personally would stay away from that stuff. But you might want to do it if that's your style. I just warn you that most audiences, even if they're not superstitious or religious, will want to stay away from that stuff. It's like a Ouija board. It's like if you got invited to a party and you brought over a Ouija board, and you're like, yeah, just go on, put your hands on the Ouija board. We'll just play. For those of you who don't know what a Ouija board is, just Google it. Ouija board. I think I don't know how to spell it actually, but it's those things you see in the horror films, and it has a bunch of letters and numbers on it, and you put your hands over. You come in a group of people, you put your hands over a piece of glass, and it goes over the letters one at a time. And it's like the spirits are communicating through the Ouija board. Yeah, that kind of stuff. A lot of people don't want to have anything to do with it. So, and I wouldn't either, to be quite honest. So, it's just a warning not to do your presentations like that. You can. I'm not going to stop you, but there are other ways. I'm going to do a whole thing on imitative magic and that sort of stuff. Now that I'm reading more about the golden bow and ancient magic, very interesting research I'm doing. So I hope to share that with you soon. Ooh, yawning. Chapter 7, Mystery Without Magic. Yeah, you don't want to do occult type magic for the most part. Just don't do it. It'll scare people off. Something that's a little less scary is psychological magic. You could do ESP for people, that type of presentation. People won't be as scared as that of that. or like a psychological type presentation, like Darren Brown, where you're like a master psychologist. That doesn't scare people off as much. Um, the other types of presentation that you could use that is mysterious but not magical is through willpower, where you are you're pushing your brain to the limit, and you're able to figure stuff out. Mathematics, scientifically, you're able to figure. You're just almost like a super genius, just through the power of your mind. And then there's the scientist, who is somebody who's doing mysterious things that shouldn't work, but they're working because you know more about science, like almost like a genius scientist who's doing magic but through science. So there's a few presentations. The book goes through them, and you know, these inventions, super inventions, crazy things that you can do. So yeah, there's a wide variety of presentations. That's where I'm going to leave it off. I'm about halfway through the book. I'm going to read the rest of the book and finish off this book club later on in the month. So you have that to look forward to. This book, by the way, I believe it's still in print. You can find it on Amazon. It's very cheap. It's interesting. I think you should have it. I don't think it's necessary. I like this book, but there's a lot that I don't like in it. I just think it could do without the tricks for the most part. I think the tricks bring the book down because some of the tricks are really bad in this book. Even though the theories and everything else is very good, some of the actual tricks are not so good. But it is worth going through. It gives you another side of performance. It's a theoretical book. If that's what you're into. I'm going to continue going through it and bringing sort of my ideas to you guys based on what I'm reading in the book and my own thoughts on some things in this book. It's a classic of magic, highly recommended by many really smart people. So I'm not going to not recommend it. I think there's more important books, but it depends. Depends on what you want. I will say, read it. Read it at least once. Read it at least once. And then leave it and come back to it years later. As I'm going through this years later, I'm not finding as much value in it, probably because I've already absorbed a lot of the wisdom in this book. I sort of know it already, so reading it isn't as exciting for me. I wish it were, but actually, I don't wish it were. If everything in this book were as exciting to me as the first time I read it, that will just have meant that I did not absorb it. So I'm sort of glad that it's not as valuable the second time around. But it is a good book. So do check it out. We'll be going through the rest later. I'm not too sure when, but I'll let you guys know the date. What a crazy week, crazy month. I was supposed to go to the U.S. today, and ended up not happening. I have to find a new place to live. The place that I was living, my dog Akaba, who you guys know is too big for the building. So I've been told by the building manager that I had to leave. Unfortunately, fortunately, I'm going on tour in a few months, a long tour, and I'm trying to find a place to live, and it's kind of difficult because I most places want you to rent for at least 1 year, and I only need it for a few months, but I'm trying to get it for less amount of time, but nobody wants to give me less amount of time. I don't want to rent an apartment and have to pay for it for a year if I'm not going to be living there for a year because I'll be traveling around the world doing magic. So that's my situation. That is why I thought I was changing the date on this. Uh, so that's my situation. So kind of sucks. I wish I could just sort of hide my dog where I was living and to not let anybody see it, but it's kind of hard because the neighbors see me coming in and out of my place with my dog multiple times a day. So yeah, there's that. Not fun. And so I'm just trying to find a place. It's not too hard to find a place, but as I get older, I sort of have a certain standard of living, and I don't want to stay in a place that's not very nice. I'd rather stay in a place that I enjoy to live for the few months before I'm on the road again. It's the few weeks. So seems like when bad things happen, they all happen at once. So not everything is bad though. Just temporary problem. Anyways, read this book. We will continue this book. I will read it. Hopefully, I have my situation sorted out before I see you next time. Because right now is not really fun. Not really fun at all. But c'est la vie, c'est la vie. Hope you guys enjoyed this part one of Henning Nelms' Magic and Showmanship, and I cannot wait to go through the rest of the book with you guys. I will catch you in the next one. And if you guys got your cards, let me know. Pretty excited. Want to know what you guys think. So, anyways, let me know. I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for coming. Hopefully we get better with the scheduling on these, as I want you guys to see more of these live instead of coming a little bit late or having to leave halfway through or watching them after the fact. I really like to be live with you guys and have a lot of fun whenever I'm with you guys. So thank you. This is really fun for me, and I appreciate every single one of these that we do. So thank you, and enjoy your weekend. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this, but we have a huge storm where I live. It's now, I don't know if you guys can see this, but we have a huge, it's so bad right now, but it was a lot earlier. We have some power outages, stuff like that. So I hope that we are fine for today to continue our discussion on this book. And this, by the way, in case for whatever reason you missed our first live stream, the continuation of going through the Magic and Showmanship book by Henning Nelms, which is considered to be one of the best books in magic theory. The tricks in this, not so great, but the theory, extremely valuable. And let's continue. Instead of going through the book, we start off going through the book bit by bit and really just going through the different chapters, talking about the book. And I thought that it would be more useful to you guys and easier for me to talk about. Instead of talking about the contents of the book, which we'll talk about in the subtext, why don't we talk about the things in this book, the theories that have been successfully used by some of the greatest magicians that we've been exploring their lives. So this whole book, if it can be summed up, is how to create powerful illusions for people. And what does that mean? Basically, what does it mean to me? It means creating something that the audience is going to feel is real. David Blaine, whose show, by the way, I just saw, had a great quote. And he talks about it in the show, and he posted this on Twitter before, and he said there's 3 rules, or 3 words to live by. And the 3 words, he says, are, well, this is the exact quote: as a magician, 3 words to live by: meaningful, interesting, believable. Is it meaningful? Is it interesting? Is it believable? And this is what this whole book is about. Is it meaningful? Is it believable? Is it interesting? Um, how do I broach this? Why don't we start? I mean, this is what this whole book sums up, and this is one of David Blaine's favorite books, and a lot of great magicians have incorporated things from this book, even though they don't really talk about it, or maybe they're not even aware. So let's get into the meat of it. Is it interesting? Okay, actually, before we get into it, let's talk about the 2 types of magic, or the different settings for magic. In this book, they talk about the story of Robert Houdin, who's performing for the Marabouts in Algeria, and it's a real situation. He's sent there by the French government to sort of suppress this uprising that's going on, and they do that by sending Robert Houdin, who does magic, and all these different tribes have their own little shamans and priests who perform magic tricks and are very powerful there. And the French government's idea is, if they can somehow convince these people that the French are superior, maybe they'll stop, or maybe they'll take it easy with the revolting. So their idea is to send Robert Houdin to perform magic, better magic, to show that the French magic is more powerful than the Algerian magic. This is their idea. And they enlist Robert Houdin, and they send him over there, and he performs, and he upstages the Algerian magicians. And as a result, he's lauded as a hero for his actions. So what does that relate to? That is a specific performing scenario, which I wouldn't call it street performing. I would say it's non-theatrical. It's outside of the theater. So for me, I would this is not a total rule, but I would say there's 2 theaters of magic. There's inside an actual theater where it's a formal show and people are paying tickets and they're sitting down and they have a seat, and there's a stage and there's somebody on the stage and they're performing. That to me is a theatrical show. And the other stage that magicians perform in is the real world. There's our best modern example to see that is, the David Blaine series, the early Darren Brown series, where he's walking around the streets of London, hypnotizing people. That's taking what we do and bringing it to the world instead of bringing the world to us, to the theaters. I hope that makes sense. So that's how I define these 2 theaters, or these 2 arenas. And what this book focuses on is these 2 arenas where people perform magic, in the real world and in the theater. And this whole book is a guide to making your magic powerful in those 2 different situations. And there's many situations, but we're sort of narrowing it down to, we're trying to encapsulate all of performing into those 2 arenas. So and David Blaine says this, and I don't know if he's referencing Henning Nelms, but he says, is it meaningful? Is it interesting? Is it believable? So let's go to the first one. Is it meaningful? The way I look at magic, the way I see magic today, is people performing things out of context for the most part. And what do I mean by that? You see it all the time, where the clothes the magician wears, the pattern, the stories that they tell, the presentations, it was designed for one era, and the rest of the world, continued on uh, going forward to the future. And magic has stayed in that place. While the rest of the world went on, magic has stayed in that place. And which is why you have guys, wearing clothes that seem very weird, telling jokes that were funny or not even funny, but created 34 years ago. And there really is a lack of awareness in uh, the era that we live in and the arena that you're performing in. And um, and then there's other people who try to contextualize their performance. And you see a lot of young illusionists doing this, and sometimes older illusionists doing this by wearing hip clothing, wearing clothing of the day. And you see these illusionists now on stage wearing, they have mohawks and skinny jeans and shirts that are all ripped up and that's holes holes torn in them, and they're and the music that they use in their show is very like modern day music that you would hear if you're going out in the club, or the music that you would hear in the top 10, top 100 songs for this week. That's what they use, and they're desperately trying to make it relevant. However, these little things in themselves don't make magic relevant or irrelevant. It's just part of this stage, it's part of the setting, um, part of the environment. It's not the main course. It doesn't encapsulate the spirit of the performance, the spirit of the trick itself. It's just the dressing, which is what this book addresses. How do we make things actually relevant? One of the greatest magicians, Johann Hofzinser, would create these presentations. This was in Vienna, 100, almost 200 years ago by now. Anyways, he'd create these presentations that were just so beautiful, and everyone could relate to. He would talk about harmony. He would talk about love and money and sympathy, and he'd build his presentations so that they were relevant because they contained stories that relate to us as humans rather than the 1800s in Vienna and the aristocratic culture. His magic was not based there. That was the dressing. That's where he was performing. That was the setting. It was not the content. It was not the meat of what he was presenting. And so when Hofzinser would present magic, to give you an example, he would talk about one of his tricks, Everywhere and Nowhere, is about a man who wants everything in life. He wants this and he wants this. And so he goes to all these places trying to get all these things. He spreads himself out. And so he's constantly appearing in different places. And Hofzinser would use this for a card plot, card trick, a classic card trick that's been repeated many times by many magicians. The most recent probably is Danny Ortiz, who has done a lot of work on the plot. A lot of the Spanish school, because of Magic Christian's influence and Juan Tamariz's influence, has worked on it. But the plot is the story about this man who wants to go and get everything in life, and he wants to go everywhere, and he ends up nowhere. So that's the name of the trick, Everywhere and Nowhere. And the plot is just beautiful because people can relate to it. People know how it is to spread themselves out too thin. I want this, but I want this. And sometimes you have something and you let go of it to get something else. Not only do you lose this, but you also lose this over here. You end up nowhere. So that's what the trick was about. Another one of Hofzinser's great pieces was The Miser's Dream. Now, a lot of people don't know Hofzinser created that presentation. And the whole plot, which was the miser, well, he wasn't a miser, but it was about a investor in Vienna. I don't know if he was in Vienna or Austria. I have to read up about it. But about a famous investor who would always take all these amazing opportunities and create a lot of money out of it. And the newspapers would ask him, "How are you making all this money? How do you see what nobody else is seeing in these opportunities?" And the man said to the newspaper, "I see the money in the air and I just reach out and I grab it. I just see it in the air and I reach out and grab it." And so that's where the miser's dream came out of, which is a classic plot. And you see magicians doing it to these days. They have their little pail and they're reaching out into the air and grabbing that money. But when Hofstadter would do it, he would tell the story about the miser. The investor, which he called the miser. Did he call him the miser? I don't know. But the miser's dream is a perfect name for the trick, because it's about somebody who's starting out with nothing and they're just reaching out in the air and grabbing the money. It's a beautiful plot. But what does it relate to? It relates to an idea that we can all understand intuitively. It's not tied to a certain age. It's not tied to Vienna in the 1800s. It's not, you could do it today and tell the story about, somebody who invests in business. You can tell the story, about a homeless man who, everybody's walking past him every single day and he has no money in his pocket. So he just dreams that he can reach out and take a penny from this person, take a penny from that person, take a penny from this person, until he has enough to, to go home, or whatever he does with the money, whatever homeless people do with money. The key, and this book talks about it, is how to create these presentations that relate to people. So this is what I believe David Blaine means when he asks, is it meaningful? Is it meaningful for the audience? Why do they care? And he talks about how to introduce different topics to the audience. And there's a variety of ways to introduce different topics. But let's break it down to the two arenas, in the real world and in the theatrical world, which is presenting on stage. In the real world, and the example that he gives is, he's doing his telekinesis or mind reading stunts, or something along those lines. Something revolves around psychic powers, and he isn't meaningful. He doesn't just sit with a group of people. Hey, let me try to read your mind. I can sometimes read minds, and I'm going to just, he doesn't randomly introduce it. He suggests bringing it up as a conversation. I saw something in the newspaper that there was a psychic fair coming to town. So I read it. I don't know if I believe in that stuff, but there's a bunch of people who are going to be in this convention center for this weekend, and I've been there. I don't know if it's real or not, but one of my friends had been. But all these psychics sit at these tables, and you can go there and you can walk up to any psychic at any table and sit down with them, and for a certain amount of money, I think it's like $20 or 15, or I don't know how much it is. They all have different prices, but you can sit down and the person will read your palm. They'll do your tarot. Apparently it's real. Some people have been saying that they're very accurate. So this is how Henning Nelms would introduce a subject. He would talk about it with people, and he would listen. It was a conversation. This is, by the way, when he's talking about performing in the real world. So he'd go up and he'd say, do you believe in psychics? It often happens to me where I'm thinking of somebody, I haven't talked to them in a long time, and I'm thinking about them. Out of the blue, my phone will ring, and it'll be them calling me, or I'll get a text message from them, or they might pop up on my Facebook feed. Like, I'm just coincidentally thinking about this person, and it happens. One of these things happens. It's not every single time, but it's enough times that I'm thinking, is there some way that I can know beforehand that this is going to happen? Like, why do these coincidences keep happening? Are they coincidences, or is it some sort of intuition or feeling that I have connecting with that energy that's out there in the universe? What do you think? And somebody will say, yeah, I had this dream that this was going to happen, and then a week later it happened. And the whole idea is to get these people to start talking and to build these conversations, and and really build it up until people are really interested and they're having this and you want to get to the point where you're not even leading the conversation, you're just a member of the conversation. And then, which leads to the demonstration, which is something along the lines of, yeah, this is, you guys have been talking for 15-20 minutes about the subject, 10 minutes, whatever, um, where people are interested and it feels like it relates to them. They're on that subject, and you say, there's this guy I know who it's super weird, and it happened by coincidence. I mean, I'm always playing with my deck of cards. You guys know I'm a magician. I have my deck of cards on me right now. I'm always playing with it, and it's always on the table or in my hands. And any single time I call him, he'll hear the shuffling over the phone, and he'll be like, "Oh, you're playing with your cards again." I'll be like, "Yeah." And he'll say, "Give them a shuffle, give them a cut, whatever. Put them on the table." This is over the phone, by the way. And I'll do it. And put the cards down on the table. Turn over the top card and look at it. You got it. I feel that it's a 5 of hearts, and he'll be correct. And it's this weird thing. Like, I'm always thinking, is this set up? Does he have a friend in on it? Somebody who's watching me with binoculars? And the people will say, it's fake, it's fake, it's fake. You want the people to discuss the story that you're telling. And it's fake. And one person saying, yeah, it might be real. I don't know. There's energy, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody say, well, why don't we try it? Why don't we try it? Which is one of the great things in magic, by the way, being challenged and being able to fulfill that challenge, being able to respond to that challenge. So, and it's not a challenge to you, it's a challenge to your psychic friend. So you say, you know what, why don't we try it? I don't even want to call him from my phone. Let's call him from your phone. Here's his number. I don't even want to talk to him. And you take the deck and you shuffle and you cut, and don't even tell him that there's a deck of cards. Don't even make sound. Just turn over the top card and let's look at it. Now everybody stay silent. And then he answered, and the person will say, hi, I'm looking for George. We heard that there's a psychic, da da da. And in that moment, as the book describes, and there's many ways to get that coded message across or to do this effect. I mean, this is a very simple but powerful effect. Anyways, your friend George, the psychic, or whatever his name is, I'm using George right now, I don't know why, gets that card right. And what do you have now? You have a piece of magic that is very strong in the real world, but it's not presented as a magic trick, which brings us to our next point. So we went from, is it meaningful? Does it relate to us? Yes. Is it interesting? Are we interested? Yeah, I think we're pretty interested. We've been talking about the subject for 15 minutes. To the next point, is it believable? Is it believable? Yeah, we were talking about it, debating it. We just tried it. Maybe there is something to this. Is it believable? Yes. You have those 3 check marks, and that's how you have, strong magic. It's not a rule, but these are guidelines. And thanks to David Blaine for writing that. What a smart guy. David Blaine, really underrated. So that is in one arena, how to create things. Now, realistically, realistically, you're not always going to have 15 minutes, 20 minutes to make an impression. You're not going to have 15 minutes to talk to people before you perform magic. So how can you perform magic in the real world and have it strong? Uh, and maybe you can't have that build up with a discussion, but you can do other things, and you can still make it meaningful. You can make it interesting. One of those things is by telling stories that are interesting to people, just like Hofstadter used to do. He was presenting in a very formal way, in his salon, his an hour of deception. Um, so I think it all comes back to making it meaningful, making it interesting, making it believable. Just like David Blaine says, you look at some of the strongest close-up magicians in the past, right now. Let's say Max Malini. Max Malini would sit at the bar telling stories, just being, fun guy. And was it believable that he was doing it? I mean, it was sort of unbelievable, but it felt real. Why? What did Malini use to make his performances believable? He used the audience. He used regular objects. He'd pick up a coin from the table. He'd grab somebody's drink. He'd grab somebody's jacket and bite off the button. He'd just do stuff in the real world, seemingly totally impromptu, and that's why it was believable, and that's why it was so strong. So these are things that we always have to think about in terms of our magic, because I'll tell you, it's very easy to sort of get trapped into having your set of magic, because you can have a great set of magic, a clean set, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, where you sit down and you perform magic at the table, and you know where you're going to get your applauses, you know where it's going to be strong, and get those reactions, get that applause at the right time, and have a solid set. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The goal, though, should be to take it further, to give people really powerful experiences. And how do you do that? I think one of those tools that you need to use is the audience. People, it's usually really boring to watch a magician sit at a table and perform a card trick with no audience. It can be interesting for a little while. It depends on what they're doing, but not for too long. But why are people so interested in seeing some of the magic shows that you see on TV and seeing magicians on stage? And part of it is the interaction with the audience. The audience is a tool to make your magic more meaningful, make it more interesting, make it more believable. And I said at the beginning of this, I saw the David Blaine show recently, my first time seeing it, his live show. And one of the things he does is one of the things I do, and I rarely see magicians doing this, and it's very hard to do. You need to have a lot of experience to do this, sort of, which is using the audience. I've only seen David Blaine's show once, his live show, but I can tell you that every single one of his shows is totally different. And usually magicians don't want their shows to be totally different every single time, but he does, and I do. And why is it different every single time? It's because we use the audience. When I was doing my run of shows recently, I had a friend come see a few shows in a row. He was visiting town for a few days, sightseeing, and he wanted to hang out that day. So in between shows, we'd go to the bar and hang out. And anyways, he came to see a few of my shows that day. I was running back to back, just a 1 hour show. Um, and so he came and he watched a few of them, and we were talking about it. He said, Maddie, it's a brilliant concept. You're doing the same show every single time, but it's totally unique every single time. And it's interesting to watch because the audience is such a big part of the show. And yeah, that's what I believe about magic, making the audience a part of the show so that you are interacting with them and they're adding to the show. Uh, their personality is being added to the show. Sorry, just hiccuped. um, and so I'll give you an example in the show. I do a little bit of coin magic in the show, and we I had for one of the shows somebody who was really uptight at first. Not uptight. It was a guy who was just taking stuff very seriously. He was very nervous up on stage. He wanted to check everything. So when it was time to look at the coins, he was looking at every little detail and looking at it, looking at both sides, seeing if there's anything special, and just being very skeptical and very uptight. And I do this trick in the show where a coin disappears and vanishes totally, and the spectator is holding all the props. And when we got to that revelation and it disappeared and the coin appeared in his hand, he just totally started, laughing hysterically and losing it. And it was, and I let him stay for a long part of the show. He was up there for maybe 20 minutes with me. He was just so good, and he brought his energy to every single one of the pieces. So when I perform these pieces in my show, sometimes the piece has suspense. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's serious. Sometimes it's sad. Because of the stories that I tell and the people who bring their energy in. It's one of the things I believe about performing magic is not only the audience is getting to know you and getting to know your tricks, I use that as a vehicle to get the audience and myself to know the spectators that I'm bringing up on stage. And so David Blaine also does this. And that's why every single one of his shows is different, because we're relying so much on the audience to bring that energy and to bring what they have to offer. I love it when a spectator says a funny joke and makes everybody laugh, or so David Blaine had, he has a piece in his show. I won't ruin the trick. I won't reveal anything, but he has a part of his show where he has skin. Basically, he has his lips sewn up. His lips are sewn up with a thread and a needle, and he asks this lady, because he wants to keep his hands by his side, if she can cut the thread so he can open his mouth. And she knows what to do because he's signaling her with his head and his body. And this woman was so funny. She had a pair of glasses around her neck, and she's like, hold on. And she takes out her glasses and she puts them on, and she's looking at the thread, and she has these giant pair of scissors and she's trying to cut it. The whole audience is laughing because the woman has these giant glasses and she can barely see. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't prearranged. This was an actual spectator who just had poor eyesight, and she needed these huge glasses, and she could barely see what she was doing as she's holding these big scissors up to David Blaine's lips. I mean, nobody knows what's going to happen. Is she going to cut his lips off? Like, it's just really funny, and it just adds a lot to the show. And it was just like a gold moment of the show. And when you involve the audience in your shows in this manner, it brings your show to life in different ways that you don't get when you just have a clean scripted show and you're just running it through every time. A guy who is the opposite, unfortunately, is David Copperfield. David Copperfield pretty much leaves no room for the spectator on stage. Anytime a spectator is brought on stage, they're given a very specific set of instructions, and they sort of just are guided. There's no, you don't get to see them. You don't get to see the spectator interact with David Copperfield much. They're instructed to do some stuff, and it's sort of scripted to be funny or scripted to evoke certain emotions, but it's not. It's not. It's not loose. It's very controlled. It's not just, you know. And for those of you guys who, maybe girls who will one day be watching this, and perform close-up magic, we know that this is what happens in close-up magic. People bring themselves into that performance, whether you're working, for one person or a small group, 10, 20 people. The people bring their emotion into that, and they bring their energy. So it's just something we need to be aware of. And what does this do? Why am I talking about the spectators so much and the audience so much? Because it's a way, I believe, to make your magic more believable. When the spectators are real, when the people are seeing other people, when the audience is seeing your spectators interact with you and it looks real, it just lends more credibility to your work. And so when you see somebody really skeptical or really react or really whatever it is, that they're doing in that moment, the audience member sees this, and the audience members know what is acting, and they know what's real, and it just lends in authenticity to your show that you don't get otherwise, and it actually makes your magic seem more authentic in a way. It's very difficult to explain why, but it's not really. I mean, I think, are very astute observers of reality, and we know how people interact, and we know how they, we know how they are, which is why it's so easy for us, who are watching TV shows, to spot a stooge on TV, because we know how people react. We know what they do. We know what they say. So when people use stooges, we know everybody is interesting in their own way. And when they're brought on stage, a way that they can entertain people and be part of the show, just makes it, just a better experience. All right, so let's see. We covered, is it meaningful? Yes, sort of, for the most part. Is it interesting? Yes. As I said, is it interesting? I will tie all these things together because they're so tied together that it's hard to separate them. But as we said, instead of dressing up the plots with new clothes and, new objects, I'm going to do, you see people doing penknife routines with USB sticks. And this is what I mean by dressing stuff up. I'm not against that. If you want to do a penknife routine, a color changing USB stick, that's fine. But you're missing the point. What is it? What is a color changing knife routine? It's a transformation or it's a transposition, depending on how you're presenting it. And why not focus on creating that plot and use the original props, which are penknives, rather than just doing the same plot, but then trying to make it new by changing the prop. It's like it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. It would be it would like it just so yeah, it just doesn't make sense. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say. Instead of dressing things up, we don't want to dress things up. We want to get to the core of things, and we want to make the core solid so that it can stand on its own. You have Howard Thurston presenting the levitation of the Princess Karnak, or Robert Houdin, who did the ether. Uh, is it ether? Yeah, ether suspension, broomstick suspension, and I think I think you could do that today and make it as magical with pretty much the same presentation. Robert Houdin's presentation, he'd bring his son on stage and he would talk about this new discovery in medicine, which was ether. And it not only renders patients unconscious because it's a light gas, it makes them unconscious so people can perform surgery and nobody can feel pain when they're under the gas. But because that gas is so light, whatever it goes into starts to flow. It just becomes super, super light. You could still do a scientific, semi-scientific, magical presentation like that, as long as you were to get the story right. It's about the feeling that you give people, rather than is this in vogue or not? Is this is this new? So to me, this is an incorrect approach, trying to dress things up as new. Um, I mean, I just, and it's a personal taste thing. Like, I have to be careful not to name names. There's a lot of magicians who, very young, try to be hip, and you see them. They're wearing these leather jackets and leather pants sometimes, and they have gel in their hair, and they're trying to make themselves look like rock stars, or they're trying to make themselves look like hip hop stars or celebrities or the things that are in vogue today. And that's not what brings you into our current era. I mean, you could dress very respectively, and I could go on a whole discourse on men's clothing. I might do it for the Studies of Magic group one day and talk about clothing and secrets in clothing. But just to briefly talk about clothing, this is a very classic jacket. This is a jacket from Pendleton. This is a car coat, and this company has been making these car coats since the, I don't know, early 1900s, maybe even earlier. I could check the tag. Actually, when was Pendleton created? Let's see. So the company was created in 1863. Very old company, very classic company. Why am I talking about this company? Because they make men's clothing, and some of the styles are more modern. They're in vogue with the fashion of the day, and some of the clothing are just more classic. And if you look at menswear, you can see that, look at the way people dressed at the turn of the 20th century, where everybody would basically be wearing suits, from children to, everybody would be wearing suits. And you had, and what I mean by suit is, not necessarily tails and a top hat. I'm just saying formal men's clothing, nice white shirt, a little vest, maybe a jacket or blazer, and a nice pair of dress pants, and obviously some nice shoes. And everyone had sort of a classic look, which is why I think we look at old photographs and we're like, oh, this just looks so good. And you can look at a lot of the clothing, it's virtually untouched. If you study menswear, there's very, very little changes that happen throughout time. You could literally put on an 80-year-old suit and it would look still good today, most of them. There's some minor differences, the cut and just some of the details on the jackets that change sometimes, the collar and different things, but it's very slight. And so for me, and the way I look at it as a performing magician is, when you perform, you don't need to go out of your way. Now, you need to be appropriate for where you're performing. And we talked about these two arenas, the real world and the theater. The real world, you could wear a suit. You don't want to be overdressed, but you can very easily wear a very nice suit. And please, please don't wear any jeans with a um, there's and it would look totally in place. It would not look. Now, if you were wearing, too formal of a suit, then it might be too far. But there's different levels of men's clothing. But you see, the people who popularized dressing in streetwear, David Blaine, who would just wear the most basic thing in the early specials, just a black pair of pants, sometimes black pair of jeans, and I think just black sneakers and black T-shirt. Or I think he would wear mostly black. He might have thrown in a few colors along the line, but I think it was mostly black. And this was just a very, casual look. And it fit with the environment. He didn't look out of place. I think for me, where the problem comes in is where you're forcing sort of a look that is inauthentic, and you don't want to do that. And so this applies to the clothing. And, the opposite is when you're on stage and you're wearing. Anyway, we'll do a whole thing on clothing. I don't want to get too caught up on the clothing because it's something that I actually think a lot about, especially when performing magic. But we'll talk about that some other time. But I want to talk about the props as well and making them relevant. A deck of cards is always relevant. I'm not a fan of these new decks of cards. A lot of the custom decks that you see, I'm a fan of my own deck because I keep the look very classic and traditional. But I think a lot of the new decks are very distracting when you look at the court cards, when you look at the pips and the indexes and the back design. They're a little too out there, that they're hard for people to they're hard for people to recognize. So you don't want to, and that doesn't mean, by the way, by using these new props that you are doing something and bring it, like, it doesn't mean that you're making your magic more relevant. And one of the perfect examples of this is the cups and balls. I think it's perfectly reasonable to use a traditional set of cups. If you guys want a link to some good cups, there's some on quickerthantheeye.com, which is Potter and Potter's retail site, the stuff that they don't sell in the auction. This set I have, which if I remember, I'll post a picture of it, but it's a set of cups by a magic designer from the 1920s, I think the 1930s, called Carl Brema. That's Carl, and then Brema is Brema. And he made very, very high quality magic props, and I'm a really big fan of his cups. When I looked at them, they seemed like the most traditional type of cups that weren't too fancy. They just looked like cups, and I don't think you need to explain every single prop. I think it's okay for a prop to be a prop, especially when the prop is iconic. The cups and balls is iconic. It needs no explanation. I had a talk about this with Ricky J once, and we were talking about things that people recognize even though they've never seen it. And we were talking about the cups and balls. That's very iconic. Most people have never seen the cups and balls, but they know what it is. Okay, there's 3 cups and the balls, and they know what the plot is, even though they haven't seen it. The same thing if a magician were to see if an audience, not a magician, if an audience were to see a bird cage with a bird in it and be told this is used in the magic show, they would. I feel like most people would know automatically that bird is going to somehow vanish from that bird cage, or that bird cage is going to vanish. I feel like there's ideas that are out there that people just know. Another thing that most people have never seen, I've never seen it in real life. I've done it in real life, but I've never seen it without searching for it, is knife throwing. But it's one of those things that is very iconic. If you see an image of somebody pulling back and about to throw a knife, or a knife going through the air, or a board and somebody strapped down and somebody holding the knife, I mean, even though you've never seen it, everybody knows what it is. That's what I mean by iconic. And that when you get to that level of doing iconic things, I really don't think you need to explain the props. I think the audience knows, they feel what it is. Let's keep going through this book. I don't even remember where I left off, to be honest, but I finished the book since last time we met, and I don't want to go through the whole book, to be honest. I just want to talk about things that I think are important. So let's talk about okay, so we'll talk about consistency of characterization, which is a whole chapter in this book, and we'll also talk about illusion, because we started this talking about illusions, and how are the illusions we present, how can we create illusions that the audience feels are real? Now, as we described, the audience, when they go to see a theatrical play, and this is bringing back to two arenas of magic: the real world magic, which is, performing on the street, performing in the bar, performing with your friends, and the theatrical type magic, which is a more formal performance where people are coming to see a magic show. Both of those directly rely on your ability to create these illusions. And what I mean by that is the illusion that you're creating for people real? Is it strong? Does the audience believe it? Now, you're doing magic, so it's sort of you can argue, is the audience really believing that you have magic powers? That's not what I'm talking about, though. What I'm talking about is the believability of it all, which is, are you creating an atmosphere where it's possible that you're actually doing what you're doing? And there's a couple ways to do this. So we talked about using the audience, using props, borrowed props, and then that's more for the real world. It also applies to the stage. And if we go into the stage, you have tools that you don't have in the real world. You have so many tools on stage that you don't have in the real world. It's just different, though. You have music. You have lighting. You can have a projector. You can play a video. You could do so many things. And music is especially powerful. We can talk about music and creating that illusion. I mean, anytime if you walked into a bar and a song starts playing, and you can see that people really like that song, and they're just tapping their arm, or they're nodding their head back and forth, or their little foot is tapping up and down with the rhythm of the music. What is this? What is this in music? What is it about music that can hijack everybody's brain and sort of synchronize them to feeling something and moving in the same way? This is an extremely powerful tool to creating an atmosphere. So when we're talking about illusions, the illusion of, and what I'm not talking about specific tricks. When I'm saying illusion here, I'm talking about the illusion of that magical atmosphere, those emotions that you're telling a story. You can even tell a story that make people cry or evoke all sorts of emotions. What are your tools to do this? One is your ability as a storyteller, and you have a variety of tools from lighting, but one of the most powerful and effective ways is that music. And if you play that music and you synchronize it so that the beats are, you play happy music or sad music when you want to be sad, or you have more mysterious music. You can really infect the audience with these emotions that they wouldn't just have otherwise. It would be very hard to create that atmosphere without that music, and which is why you see so many, really pretty much every single movie that you see now has a very heavy soundtrack. There's almost no moment in most movies. Well, it depends what movie you're watching, to be honest. But there's always a lot of music. There's an action scene. There's fast-paced music. When it's a sad scene, there's more of a just background tune that just subdues the audience. So these are all tools that we have our disposal. So we're talking about how to create those illusions and maintain them in these different arenas. The storytelling is very important. One other thing that he goes at great lengths to talk about is the consistency of your character. Um, so who and character, by the way, which is so important. Uh, I don't even know which one I should talk about first. Um, let's talk about character first. Who are you when you're performing? And there are many people who have uh, a different approach to this. You look at a guy like Lance Burton. He is very suave. He's he's a magician. He's doing magic on stage, but he's not a real magician. He doesn't carry that off stage. You look at a performer like Uri Geller. Uri Geller is not a magician. Uri Geller is a Uri Geller is Uri Geller. He's a man who has powers. That's his character. That's who he is, and it stays with him, whether he's on stage, on camera, off camera. He's always that same guy. He's very consistent. That's who he is. David Blaine is very much the same. You feel like David Blaine is a magician, even though he's a real guy. People feel he's a magician. And David Blaine was very smart when he started doing magic. He would go on these talk shows and just he'd draw an eye in the middle of his hand and just look at the television presenter and nod. And then he'd go on another show and he'd talk, and then he'd open up his shirt and reach into his chest and pull out his heart and just die on the stage. These were very powerful things because people watching this, in and of itself, it's just a stupid thing. Like, oh, you have a fake heart that you put under some material on your chest, and you got a prosthetics person to make it look real, and then you just pulled it out. It's a stupid effect. It's not even a magic effect. It's like a nothing. It's not an effect. It's just silly. It's just gross. Like, why would you do that? What did David Blaine do? David Blaine was able to create this character and this consistency so that people felt like he could do anything at any moment, or he would just like it's just wild and unpredictable. So when David Blaine did it, I highly recommend you look that up. Just go to YouTube. David Blaine pulls out his heart, rips out his heart. It's quite a clip, and you can see the effect that he gets out of it. The whole studio audience just losing their minds and running out. Like, what the hell are we watching? The man just killed himself. He ripped out his own heart. Um, so definitely something to look at. Let's keep talking about these characters. Let me answer some questions first. This is from Mr. Siggy. I hope I'm saying that right, by the way, Mr. Siggy. Don't you think music is making everything so much easier? In my own opinion, I can't use music in my show. I have to learn to make impact without extra supplements. It depends if it's appropriate or not. There's always a time for it, and you know, there's times where it makes it more difficult. As when we were talking about using the audience to really build into how do we say this? Using the audience to make your show more believable, like I do. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You're okay, Makiak. Well, I'll have to figure out how to pronounce your. I'll have to figure out how to pronounce your name. I'm so bad with these names. But I was saying, one of the problems that I found in my show with music, and you'll notice, for example, with David Blaine and other certain types of performers, Uri Geller, for other reasons. But in my show, the music made it very hard sometimes with some pieces uh, because I bring audience members on stage, and when you play music, it does a few things. It forces you to start your trick and finish your trick and key moments of your trick within a certain framework. You don't have a lot of room to play around. Also, it forces your audience into a more passive mode. They're not interacting as much because they hear the music, they know that they're just a prop, and the emotion is already created by that music, which makes it very hard to have that freedom that comes with just having a spectator and sort of letting it develop naturally, that interaction. So what are the downsides of music and lighting and all those stuff on stage? um, One show that I'm very interested in seeing is Luke Germain's show. Luke Germain is doing a new show, which is, if you guys know who Luke Germain is, he's a wonderful, um, I don't know how to describe him. He's sort of like a mind reader from the UK. Brilliant mind and magic, and he has a new show that it's only 30 people per show, and it's very intimate. It's a mind reading show where everybody's sitting around him and he's just talking to people and doing these mind reading effects. And I'm very interested in how to see his show, to see how he's using music and using all these things, because there is definitely a balance that can be, there's definitely things that music can do, and there's things that you can't do with music. And I've definitely had moments ruined by music, and I've also had moments suffer because there's a lack of music that I just knew these mind reading effects. And I'm very interested in how to see his show, to see how he's using music and using all these things, because there is definitely a balance that can be, there's definitely things that music can do, and there's things that you can't do with music. And I've definitely had moments ruined by music, and I've also had moments suffer because there's a lack of music that I just knew, like, oh, this would be so good with music right this moment. Like, I'm thinking that in my mind as I'm performing, but it's like you can't do anything. Actually, you can. There's these little devices. I forget what they're called because I don't use them, but there's devices that I have friends use so good with music right this moment. Like, I'm thinking that in my mind as I'm performing, but it's like you can't do anything. Actually, you can. There's these little devices. Um, I forget what they're called because I don't use them, but there's devices that I have friends use uh, that you can control all the music in your show from your pocket, and it's just a little device with some switches, and you can press it and control. You can control all the music in your show from your pocket, and it's just a little device with some switches, and you can press it and control when to start the music, make it louder, and you can do it in the middle of your show without ruining everything. Oh, getting a call for louder, and you can do it in the middle of your show without ruining everything. Oh, getting a call from the UK, I think. I can't answer that right now. Makiek sounds like Mac from the UK, I think. I can't answer that right now. Makiek sounds like Machiki. Wow, I was way off. Machiki. Machiki. Like Magicy. Okay, I'm probably ruining it. I'm sorry. Back to back to characters. Ascanio knew what his character was. I don't think Ascanio was his own character when performing magic. Everybody has their own character. Juan Tamariz is a character. Juan Tamariz is definitely a character when he's performing magic. He's like, he's just this crazy guy who's very calm and then just screams and just very erratic and very funny, like almost like a clown, like but not a clown, not like but who Juan Tamariz. Oh, I said it right. I said your name right. I will. We'll have to work on that. You'll have to record it for me, and then we'll have to do it right next time. Ascanio, his character when he was performing, he would always say it's himself who's performing. It's his real self, but it's an idealized version of himself. He's a little bit more funny. It's like how he would be if he's at a party and it's his party and everybody's invited to sort of, it's like his birthday party or something like that. And everybody's there to sort of celebrate him. So he's a little bit, all the jokes he tells, everybody laughs at because they're a little bit funnier. He's a little bit more confident, a little louder, a little more playful. He's himself in an idealized way. He's not, there's limits though to his powers. He's somebody who's doing, who's performing magic. He's not a magician. Ascanio's not just going to stand up and do a levitation or, his magic is very confined to his character. And this is what this whole book is about in terms of creating that illusion. How to build a character that is real and then not break it. So, and there's limits to all your characterizations and all the characteristics that you have. Add to what you can do and also limit it. And you just have to look at who you are when you're performing and see what can you do. Like what can you do that's reasonable? What can you do that's powerful? What can you do? What do you want to go for? Maybe, you look at a guy like David Copperfield. Great example. David Copperfield is David Copperfield on stage. David Copperfield cannot do anything. He's not a magician outside of the theater. He can do very strong illusions inside the theater. You know that David Copperfield is a historian of magic, that he designs these incredible props. He writes these scripts with the music. The audience sees this and they know who David Copperfield is as a performer, as a person. Who David Copperfield is on stage is who he is in real life. You can tell he's a guy who, is not. David Copperfield is not funny. Even in his show, he's not designed to be funny. There's not a lot of moments where you're watching David Copperfield in his live show and you're like, this guy's hilarious. He's not. There's no time where the audience loses it from humor. There's a few pieces that are designed to be humorous, like when he does the duck thing in slow motion, when he does just other moments. They're designed to be funny, but that it's designed to make you laugh, and you understand that it's part of the show. You don't look. I don't think anybody would describe David Copperfield as hilarious. I don't think anybody would. And it's not what he's going for. So we have to look at that. Who is Darren Brown? Why am I going through all these people? Because I think it's important to look at who they are on stage and what it means to the audience. Who's Darren Brown? Darren Brown plays a role which is described in this book right here. It's actually described in the character section. He describes it as something that hasn't been done yet, but has a lot of potential to be playing the role of an expert psychologist and basing all their presentations around that. And that's what Darren Brown has done. He's built a character around the power of the mind and his mind and memory and hypnosis. And with Darren Brown, he's also very clever in that he never fully limits his character. You sort of know what's like. Darren Brown does not do oil and water. He doesn't. Well, he does in his old card magic DVDs. Pretty good card magic as well. But you know from watching Darren Brown on stage um, what his performing character is. Darren Brown is not doing any big stage illusions. He's not bringing people on stage, vanishing them. He's not bringing, he's not making a car appear on stage because it doesn't fit with his character. It doesn't fit with his powers. You look at Darren Brown, he's very, you think this is a very well-spoken man. He's very intelligent. He scripts stuff. He can look at people. He can read them. He studied astrology. He studied science. He studied the human mind. You sort of get that, and you sort of get what his presentations are because they fall in line with his character, and that gives him tremendous leeway into doing all sorts of stuff, but it also doesn't limit it because he doesn't leave it too constrained. He doesn't just say, I'm a psychologist or I'm a memory expert. He sort of leaves the doorways open. So when Darren Brown does more of a psychic type thing, it doesn't feel out of place because you're not like, oh, it's weird that Darren Brown is doing a psychic reading now. You sort of know that he can do it, even if you don't know how he's doing it. Is it cold reading? Is it real? He can make it feel really real, but is it real? He doesn't answer all the time. And I think this is important, leaving the limitations of your power open. Having a character, but not defining it. You don't just want to have one power. You don't just want to be a psychic, which is, I think, one of the problems with mentalism shows. A lot of them, not all of them. And I'll talk about Luc Germain. I asked Luc Germain, because we were talking about names, and he said, Maddie, for you, it's perfect that you are Maddie the magician, because it gives people the idea that you are a magician, that you are, of that line of magicians, that you're following in that historical footpath, and that's sort of what you do, and what you do falls into it. And the reason why he just uses his name, Luc Germain, is because he's a real guy on stage, and he doesn't want to present himself as a psychic. He just wants to say, this is who I am, this is what I'm performing in a theatrical setting. He's not saying this is fake, this is real, this is not real. He's just saying, my name is Luc Germain, and I'm doing a show where amazing things happen inside the show. Some of the stuff can be done outside of the show, but not all of it. But this is what I'm presenting to you during this hour. I've designed this show to have these moments, and these emotions, and these revelations, and all these things that are contained, but it's not encompassing who I am, and it may not be able to be done ever again the way that I'm doing it in the show. So he's not approaching it from a way saying, is it real? Is it fake? You get into a lot of problems when you define things like that. And when you set those boundaries, you don't want to set those boundaries. For myself and for many situations, you don't want to, it's better off if you don't set those boundaries, if you just sort of leave it open to people. Malini was sort of a character, Malini, you always felt like Malini was a joker, a trickster, because he was always telling jokes and these crazy stories, but then he'd do something that was totally amazing and it would blow your mind. So it was weird. You had this dual sense that he was a real guy, but he also had these incredible powers, but he couldn't just do anything. He was a real guy, and he'd tell you about his life and his adventures and his travels, and the crazy things that would happen to him, and not only the positive things, the negative things. So you were able to connect with him on that level, and he would never just say, like, I'm this powerful character, I'm this sorcerer, I am a magician, I can do anything. You want to leave things open for the audience. At least I think that's a good approach. And then, there's some approaches where you have a character which causes conflict. Uri Geller causes a lot of controversy and conflict because he very much presents what he's doing as real. And he tells his story as he's real. He doesn't say, when I was a kid growing up in Israel, I learned, how to do some of this stuff, and then I started entertaining people with it. Uri Geller will literally sit there and tell you, yes, when I was 4 years old in my garden, there was an orb that floated over the garden and it came up to me. And then when I reached out to the orb, I fell unconscious. Now, the very next day, my mother was giving me a bowl of soup and I had a spoon. And when I went into the bowl of soup and I lifted up the spoon to my mouth, I noticed there was no spoon there. And it wasn't the spoon vanished. The metal of the spoon had bended. And I knew that it was me who did it, and the power of my mind and that energy that I was connecting with. And then I started to do all these things. I would look at the clock and I would say, stop. And it would stop. And then I would say, start and go. And it would go. And I would look at this metal and hold it. And I would feel the metal start to warm and bend. And so he tells you, he tells you this fantastical story. And he tells that story as it's true. This is the story of his life. And he gets into a lot of problems because there are people who obviously have conflict with that, and they want a clear-cut answer. Is it real? Is it fake? Are you doing Uri Geller, are you doing this for real? Are you bending the spoon with the power of your mind, or are you using your hand? Because Uri Geller will be like, I don't know how these things work. I just focus, and the energy makes it happen. But it's like, Uri, just answer. Is the energy that's making it bend the energy from your hands bending it, or is it solely the power of your mind? Listen, my mind was very powerful ever since I was a child. I was born as a poor boy. He just, Uri Geller is a funny guy. So what is the lesson here? You don't want to ruin the magic for people. You don't want, I always hear these lame things from magicians. And I used to use these lines. So if you ever use these lines, don't feel too bad about it. But these lines like, oh, I can keep a secret, so can I. Or I sold my soul to the devil. Or, whatever horny magician line, which is a lie that you hear. It's just silly. Or, just all those lines are silly. I think if somebody asks you about your magic and how it works, your answer should be in line with your character. So, for example, when somebody asks me how magic, like I'll just do a trick, and they ask me, "Oh man, how do you do that?" You got to know that they don't really want to know how it's done. So it's okay to not answer. You can just laugh at them. Just give them a pat on the back and just grab them by the neck of the back of the neck and start laughing. Let them know that this is just fun. You don't need to answer. You don't need to use words to answer. You can sort of let them know non-verbally that their question isn't going to add to their experience. And it's okay to ignore a direct question. So let's continue on talking about character. The character is the number one thing you have to making your magic. Yeah, you got your character and you got your effects. So those are the two things. And you got to keep those things in line. This is what this whole book is about. How to create the illusion of magic and sustain it, both in the real world and on the stage. That's what the whole book is about. It's not so much about the tricks and this. It's about the story, how you tell, how to make these stories that relate to people. Ace Assembly. Arturo de Ascanio has this beautiful story when he's performing the Ace Assembly. And it's about, I'll just go through the presentation. He has the 4 aces and he's saying, what are these? Oh, these are 4 aces. But they're not only 4 aces. These are a family of aces, a family. This one is the one with the little coconut head. That's the clubs. And this is the one who followed his heart. This is the ace of hearts, and this is the one who chased money all his life, the things of this world. This is the diamonds, and this is the father ace. This is the big one. This one always stays at home, and while the other ones go out into the world for different reasons, they always come back to the father. And he tells a story, and it's a beautiful story, and it's a little silly, and it's funny because when I started performing it, and I would, I would, I would. Oh, my dog is crying. Let me just try to get through this point. I love the presentation by Scanio. When I would start performing it, and I'm telling you the story about this family of aces, I don't know if it was me, the way I was telling it, I sort of had a smirk on my face because, like, these are cards, but I'm telling the stories if they're people, the people would start laughing. So as I would tell the story, at the beginning of the plot, and it takes a few minutes to get through the whole trick, but at the beginning of the plot, the audience is laughing because I'm talking about how life is like a deck of cards. It's very easy to, play them out of tune and all these things. And at the beginning of the trick, people are laughing because it's like, oh, it's so silly. Maddie never tells stories when he's talking about these card tricks, but this is one where I'm telling this story, and the story's about these cards. The cards are the characters. So I'm sort of saying it tongue in cheek, and the audience is sort of laughing. This is the father, this is the son, and this one rises to the top, and this one goes over here. And it's sort of funny at the beginning, but by the end of the story, everyone is almost crying. When I get to that last little ace, the one with the little coconut head, the rest of the family is all together, but this was the one that never made it home. Instead of handling his new life, his new friends, his new love and new commitments, they were like weights on him, and they buried him, they consumed him. And as I'm saying that, I'm dropping the cards on that ace until you can barely see it anymore. He's slowly being buried by all these things in his life that he wanted, that he thought he could never get. He forgets at this point all about his home, and he'll never make it home again. He's totally buried. He's totally gone. I dropped that last card on, and it's sad. He'll never make it home. Things are what they are. Things are what they are. But sometimes things are what our hearts want them to be. And move those cards aside. I turn that card over, I turn this card over. Sometimes things are as our hearts want them to be, which is why he's able to make it home. And I turn over the card, and it's a beautiful ending. But it's funny how, so many people who, when I saw that plot and so many people doing it, we have to realize how the audience is looking at us, which is why when I tell that story, it's always funny at the beginning because it's like, how ridiculous, this person is telling the story about cards, and these cards are characters, and like, it's just silly. It's not really what I usually do. And then by the end of it, they're totally sucked in because they've been not only hearing the story, which starts out as a joke, but then it starts to get serious. And by the end, it's just like, oh, it's a real story. It's a beautiful story, how they all come together, and the magic is beautiful. So I'd recommend you watch that. It's called Aces with Love by Scanio. And I'll put the video up or whatever. I'll eventually put it up, but you can find it on YouTube as well. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful presentation. But it goes back to the character. Can you perform your favorite pieces of magic? Yes. That's one of my favorite pieces of magic. I just can't perform it by itself. I need to tell a story with it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. It's not really what I do. I try to do stuff that connects with the audience at some level. So, which is why I stay away from a lot of card plots or try to make them relevant. So, hold on, my dog is making some noise. Can you close the door for a second? Because yeah, because my dog is making some noise. He'll be okay. He's just being a baby. All right. What else can I say about this book before we get to the end of this? Go to the table of contents. Okay, another great thing about this book is it talks a lot about the stage. Basically, blocking, which is where you're standing out on the stage at certain times. I'm horrible at all this stuff. I'm horrible about all this theater stuff. I don't know how to stand on stage. I don't know how to walk on stage. I don't know how to talk on stage. Where to look, how to point, how to do all these things. I'm just going to take this jacket off. It started out cold here, warmed up. I don't know how to do all these things. So what I do is I always work with friends of mine who are in theater who can help me, who can look at me and be like, Maddie, you look really awkward here, which also helps to use a camera. You have to realize that whatever you say and whatever you do is what the audience sees. So you have to really get over that. Film yourself, watch videos of yourself. It's very hard for me to watch video of myself. Everybody seems to hate the way they move, sound, look, whatever your deal is, whatever your psychological issue is. Just get over it. Watch yourself. Because what you watch on video when you're rehearsing and if you film your performance is what the audience is seeing. And so you need to be able to watch that to put it in line with what your idealized version is and be critical with yourself. So definitely do that. It's very hard, but you just have to do it. So this talks a lot about the staging, all that stuff. Transitions are very important in shows. These are all stuff that you will learn through experience. Just do it, put those tricks together. So, and I'm going to talk about my process a little bit, how I work. And I usually don't talk about how I work because it's very hard to understand for people. I'm very intuitive how I work. I write a script, or I sort of know the story I sort of know the trick. I know how it's going to work. I know the technique, but I know how it's going to fit it all together, and I don't know what the energy is going to be like at certain points. So what I do is I honestly I just put the magic together and I just do it. And the first couple times I do it, whenever my friends see me perform new material, they're like, "What the hell was that?" Because it's honestly horrible. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm awkward. I don't know where I'm standing. I don't know where I'm looking. I don't know because I have to look at the audience and just be there and feel what's happening for it to make sense. I just need to do it for it to make sense to me. It probably doesn't make sense to explain it that way, but that's sort of my process. And to make sense, I just need to do it for it to make sense to me. It probably doesn't make sense to explain it that way, but that's sort of my process. And I do that a few times until I figure it out. So my friends will oftentimes see me working on a new piece, and I do that a few times until I figure it out. So my friends will oftentimes see me working on a new piece, and they'll see me do it, and they'll be like, "What the hell was that, man? What were you doing on stage? You're like, what was that?" And then they'll come see it, and they'll see me do it, and they'll be like, "What the hell was that, man? What were you doing on stage? You're like, what was that?" And then they'll come see it, a few days later, a few weeks later, after I've had some time with them. They'll be like, "Wow, this is amazing," because you never know what the trick is going to be like. You can only do so much work from home. It depends what your style is. My style is very much interacting with people. I almost always have spectators on stage who I'm interacting with. I'm hardly ever alone. There are some moments where I'm alone, where I'm just performing a piece and it's just me. And that you can work at home alone on. And Oh, you gotta go. All right, see you, man. We continue this later, but I will continue without you. Um, I'm actually gonna have to wrap it soon as well, but um, so there's some things that you can work at home, and there's other things that you have to work at in person. And for me, that's what my process is. Uh, so I think that pretty much sums up the book. I mean, this is a very good book. It's not that big, but it's pretty dense. Like it'll take you a while to get through this book. This is really hard for me to reread. I reread it these last couple of weeks for you guys so that it's fresh in my mind. I really did not want to be reading this book at this moment, just because it's so thick. It really takes a long time to read. But if you haven't read this book, pick it up. I believe it's on Amazon. I believe you can probably find it for, let's see here, Magic and Showmanship. $15, $16, something around there. Oh, and you can even get it on Kindle. So you can download it today, actually, from Amazon, or maybe you can even get it from Google Play or the iStore, iTunes, whatever it's called, and read it today. It is definitely worth reading. It's not too expensive. This book, I believe, is still in print by Dover. It's very popular for magicians. It's very understudied, underutilized. It is very dense. You're not going to understand everything in this book in your first reading, but as you grow as a magician, just keep this in mind, and you will grow with this book, and this book will grow with you. It's one of these books that you can sort of just keep looking back on and getting more from it throughout the years. So I hope I have been able to add some context to the book. It is definitely a heavy work. I mean, it doesn't look like a serious work. This book really deserves a nice hardcover version, in my opinion. It does not look like a serious book from just the material and the way it's printed, but this is a seriously heavy theoretical book. I wish I could do something with it, but I believe it's in copyright and they're not going to let that go. But something that I am working on. So next month, our book club for next month, our book for next month's book club is Edwin Sachs' Sleight of Hand, and this is one of my favorite books in magic, and I am going to be making it available as an ebook. I just made a fresh, brand new scan of the second edition, which is the enlarged edition. It was published in 1885, and I just made a beautiful. I'm working. I have a scan of it, and I'm just working right now on turning it into a beautiful ebook. I'm going to be. I don't think I will annotate it at this time, just because it's like 400 pages. It'll take me too long to do that. But I'll be making it available as an ebook. I might write a little introduction, and that'll be available. I think to entice people, because I would love to have some more members for the book club. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be offering it for free for the members of our Patreon, and anybody who becomes a member for this next month or so when it becomes ready. It'll be free for them as a download, and then for you guys it'll be free, just as a thank you from me. But it's a PDF that will sell for, I think, $10. So I'm just working on that now, and the illustrations look amazing. I'm just making sure the text is all fresh. I'm making it into a text-based PDF, which means that you will be able to read most of the text, about 99% of the text, and zoom in on your phone or ebook, and it'll be crisp because it'll be vector based. The other remaining text, which is like 1%, I'm not going to be replacing it with a vector text just because I really, really like the old school look of it, and the new modern day fonts can't duplicate that look. And I want to have that old school look from the original book for the titles, even though the text is in a more modern type. The most of the text is in a more modern type. Well, not a modern type, it's a type hasn't really changed, but the type for the titles is really nice. So I'm keeping those as just as they are. But that is very exciting for me. Very exciting little side project. So that'll be available hopefully within a few. Type hasn't really changed, but the type for the titles is really nice. So I'm keeping those as just as they are. But that is very exciting for me. Very exciting little side project. So that'll be available hopefully within a few days. Just got to create a nice cover for it. I don't want to use a regular title. This will be the first Before Magic edition of ebooks that we do. So a few days, just got to create a nice cover for it. I don't want to use a regular title. This will be the first Before Magic edition of ebooks that we do. So of a long line, I plan to do a lot of ebooks for the website, high quality ebooks, and make them very cheap and make them available. And they'll all have either annotations or an introduction. Not all of them are going to have annotations, just because that's so big, like that's a massive project to work on. But some will be annotated. They should all have new introductions or a note section by me, which is my thoughts and my notes that I take through the book for readers coming today. And this is not going to be, adding every single note on the history of every piece, but this is just performance notes, what I feel about the books. Anyways, just it'll be interesting. So we have that coming up in the next few days. Next week, we have our Studies in Magic group, where we'll be going over Triumph and the reverse card plot. What else do we have? Yeah, the ebooks coming up. We have new articles on the Before Magic site. I put out a new article on Cardini called Transformation. I put out a new article on Arturo Descanio titled The Nature of Magic, or maybe I think it's called The Nature of Magic. I think that's what I titled it. So those are really interesting. We've got a lot of comments on the website. And so the way the website works is it pulls comments on different mediums that I plug it into, Facebook and so on. So there's about, I don't know, a few dozen comments for the Arturo Descanio article. So that's really, really cool. I love to see that interaction going on and people discussing different things, different ideas, and different thoughts about these articles. So thank you guys for reading and commenting. I hope that becomes a home for people. I don't want to create a forum just because that's not what I want to do at this point. But I think the comment section is really cool, and obviously we have this. What else is happening? The ebooks. Yeah, the ebooks. Super excited about that. Yeah, I'm creating a new cover for the book, so it should look really nice. It'll be the first Before Magic edition. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm working on a new deck of cards called Emanations. I've been working on a few decks, but the ideas never really came together, and I was changing my mind. I didn't have I had full ideas, but I didn't. Anyways, I have this new deck coming out called Emanations. I'm just starting the artwork on it now. It looks very promising in terms of the concept. So I'll have new updates about that soon. As for the Carlisle Club, I'm building it up. The room is almost ready. It's like 90% ready. I just have to get a few more stuff to sort of make it a little bit more soundproof, and and just add a few more decorations so the spaces are empty. And it's where I'm going to be filming. I hope it'll be a monthly show called the Before Magic Show. So the show will be split into a few things. There will be just updates on the Magic world and cardistry worlds, just film commentary on some stuff. It'll be like a news show with me as your host, and I'll be doing deck reviews and other reviews and interviews with magicians. It'll be a fun little show. I expect each episode to run for about an hour. That's the idea right now, but we'll see. I'm not too sure because sometimes the interviews I think are going to run much longer, and maybe I'll split the interviews and put the longer interviews as I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it, but it's going to be fun for me. It's going to be a sort of a monthly show for Before Magic. I found it was making in the Magic world a Magic news show, so that'll be fun. What else do we have going on? Oh, once the room is ready as well, I'm also going to be filming these instructional videos. These are going to be DVD quality type videos, but they won't be printed on DVDs just because I want to keep the production costs down. They will all be made available as downloads, and they'll be shot in 4K, and you'll have a choice whether you want to. The goal is to give you the choice whether you download it in 4K or download it in 1080. But I want to have that catalog of really high quality Magic instructions. So the first few releases that I will be doing is a whole, and this will be a multi-hour thing on the handling of double cards, really going through everything with proper camera, proper lighting, just going through everything on the handling of double cards. I'll be talking about certain I'll do other downloads on tricks like Triumph, Oil and Water, and a few other pieces as time goes on. What else do we have going on? Yeah, I'm just sort of building up this Before Magic site. I really want it to be a place where people can learn about Magic and interact with our art form, and also have it very conducive to developing good magicians in the future. So it's a slow process. It's a steady process. There will be a podcast that will also be part of it soon. I don't know if that's going to be my personal podcast or a different podcast, but yeah, that's sort of what's happening in the next little while. It's a lot of work, and I never do anything for the reward. As you guys know, I don't really make much money doing this, but it's something that I really love to do. I love connecting with you guys and sharing this stuff. And there are other stuff that I do that makes money, like the playing cards and so on, but it's never really about the money for me. It's about just about sharing what I do and sort of trying to raise the bar, because I've seen many generations of Magic sort of go downhill, and I've been to a lot of Magic clubs and a lot of Magic societies and conventions throughout the years, and the bar has been lowered, and I just find it very sad. So I'm just trying to do my part to raise the bar, because I think the more that people like us read and educate ourselves and just develop as performers and thinkers and creators of Magic, it contributes to the art, and it just helps raise the bar. So that is all for today. I think I've pretty much covered everything. I didn't cover everything in this book, but again, please get this book, give it a chance. This is a great book, not too expensive. This is a serious book, so you're not going to get a lot of tricks out of it, but you're going to get a lot of food for thought. And there's a bunch of exercises in the book, such as the character exercise, finding your character, finding different characters. And it's okay to have a character that only does one show or particular show and experimenting with different characters. Don't be afraid of doing that. And there are some people who have tried that throughout the years and who have developed really strong acts. A great example, if I'm going to write an article about, is a Chung-Ling Soo, William Robinson, who was a magician from the UK, I believe, and who played, he was a magician's assistant throughout the years for Herman and for, I think, who else was he an assistant for? He was an assistant for a few people, and he had his own shows that really never took off. Characters, Nana Sahib, he played an Indian magician, wasn't very successful. And then he played a few characters. You can read about them in the book by Jim Steinmeier. And then he hit this character, Chung-Ling Soo, where he dressed up as a Chinese magician and he created this Chinese act, and it was a huge, huge success. Very, very successful performer. So, as I say, this book is all about characters, finding your characters. Never be afraid to play with these different characters and personalities, because you never know which one is going to be totally different from how you are performing today, and you might be really successful with it, or it might be a character that you use for a specific market and not for other markets. So anyways, just something to think about. And yeah, with that, I will wish you guys a good weekend. I'm going to try to enjoy the rest of my weekend. I'm so surprised that this didn't cut the whole way through, because I've been having problems with my internet. But enjoy that, and I will see you guys next week on Sunday. For those of you in the Studies in Magic group, we're going to be doing what we talked about. So Sunday, usual, and I think that's it. I think we've covered everything. So I will see you guys later. Peace and have a good day. And I'll leave those links later on where you can get all these stuff. Links later on where you can get all these stuff. Excited for Sleight of Hand. That's going to be a good book. It's been a while since I read it. Maybe Excited for Sleight of Hand. That's going to be a good book.